IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. It is June 18th. Can't believe it's already halfway over, but we are one step closer to the start of fall camp, which means we are one step closer to Notre Dame kicking off against Miami down in South Florida on August 31st. I think we're 75 days out now, which is really...
Let me check the official game / what's the name of that guy who does that?
Oh gosh.
He does a great job. Oh man, I'll have to find it. But yeah, I'll find it. But yeah, he does a good job with that stuff. But yeah, I'll find it here in a minute. But we're in the 70s.
Okay, well, good deal. Regardless, we are coming up a lot quicker than what we thought, or at least what I thought, because this is my first full off season being on this side of the chair. And I'm happy that Notre Dame is one step closer to kicking off against Miami. Now, we're going through a lot of off-season content, but of course, we always have to make a quick little pit stop and do the buy, sell, hold because it is Wednesday. It's one of our favorite segments that we do here at Irish Breakdown. Now, on the off chance that this is your first buy, sell, hold, this is something that we do for the premium message board members, and you see it scrolling down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Our guy Salty puts up a thread inside of the Champions Lounge, and basically what this show is about is you guys will either submit a question or submit a scenario, and after some discussion, Brian and I will decide whether we buy the premise, we sell it, or we put a hold on it if we just don't know or don't have all of the information needed. Now, this isn't like a Friday free-for-all mailbag, so if you just put in buy, sell, hold in the live chat, we're not going to set it aside. But if you are a premium message board member and you didn't get yours up in time, because I know how busy everybody gets, you can always throw in a super chat with your buy, sell, hold, and we'll make sure that it gets covered before the show is over today. But we have a lot of awesome submissions in here today. I do know that up north where Brian lives, you guys are getting some pretty extreme weather up there.
Yeah, we are. We had some crazy weather last night that was very unfortunate, and we're supposed to get some more today. So there's a chance that our power may go out at some point in time. If it does, Trevor's just going to roll solo. But if I freeze, you guys are going to know we had a power outage, and Trev's going to take me out and just keep on rolling. So we're going to have to make do with it. My wife's sitting beside me. She's like, oh, my God, he did not just do that. But I did that because it's my show, and I can do that. But yeah, it's been some pretty bad weather the last couple of days, so we're gonna be ready to rock and roll.
Well, hopefully everybody stays safe during this unfortunate weather here in Indiana. I just got a notification on my phone. Indianapolis is under tornado watch as well until 8 p.m. So
that's always fun.
We're just having a lot of fun.
Midwest summers, baby. That's how we roll. That's how we roll.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm ready to pass the time with some buy, sell, hold, Brian. What's it?
Absolutely. So just a reminder, you have to be a board member and submit that on the board. It's unfortunate because there was one that was brought up that was very good. You know, you can maybe do a super chat if you're not part of the show. We did have a super chat from my guy, Remington Jeans. Let's go. Buy, sell, hold. Thank you, Remington. We appreciate that, Trev. It's that time, man. Let's rock and roll and get started with today's buy, sell, hold. And of course, as you know, since our guy Salty starts the thread, we always give him a shout out and allow him to get the first buy, sell, hold submission. So let's get going.
Buy, sell, hold. When one considers the top 5 teams whose head coaches have the most to prove as far as taking their teams to the college football playoffs this season, that list includes Brian Kelly, Mario Cristobal, Mike Norvell, and Kalen DeBoer.
That's a good list. You know, trying to think through, I'll buy that. I think all 4 of those coaches have a lot to prove this season, Trevor. Brian Kelly's obviously going into year 4 at LSU. His 3rd year was his worst year. You know, when the coach that replaced him, Marcus Freeman, has kind of steadily improved every year. Brian Kelly's actually regressed every year. Played in the SEC title game in year 1, went 10-3 in year 2, despite having a Heisman Trophy winner. 2 first-round draft picks at wide receiver who both had 1,000 yards as rookies in the NFL. Still lost 3 games that year. Made a change defensively. They got better on defense last year, but were actually worse as a team. And went 8-4 in the regular season, then won a bowl game against I believe Baylor. I think they beat Baylor in a bowl game to finish 9-4. So there's a lot of pressure on him, and all the things that he always told everybody you can't do at Notre Dame is now doing. And it's a big year because, you know, look, there's some LSU fans that are going to run cover for Brian Kelly. He's a master at getting people to run cover for him. but he certainly did that at Notre Dame, doing that at LSU. But you're starting to hear more and more people that cover the team and more fans be like, hey, he's our guy, but better win this year. So I think there's a lot on him to – I don't know that Brian Kelly is like playoffs or bust for him. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I think you have to be noticeably better. If like for some scenario they're like 10-2 and they just missed the playoff because there's a bunch of 1-2 lost teams this year, which is increasingly possible as you have these uneven schedules because of how big the leagues are. It's more and more possible nowadays to have 4 SEC teams with like 1 or 2 losses, or 1 loss and maybe 2-3 with 1 loss or undefeated, and then 4-5 with 2 losses, and same thing the Big Ten, especially the Big Ten, because I'll give the SEC credit. There's a lot more competitive games between top teams in the SEC than there are between top teams in the Big Ten. There's also, I think, more top teams in the SEC as we've talked about. But, I think let's say he goes 10-2 and doesn't make the playoff. That's good progress for me. Like, that's okay. You took a step forward. For the first time since you've been here, you took a step forward. Now let's see what you can do and all those type of things. And you've got it's barring a bunch of defections, which I don't anticipate. They've got a really good recruiting class right now that they're working on building. They got to hold on to Tristan Keys at wide receiver, who's taking a hard look at Tennessee and some other schools. But assuming they hold on to him, you're going to have a really good recruiting class. So they had a great portal offseason. I think it gets a little overstated, but it's still great. It's like filled a lot of needs for them. I just think overall that much portal additions says a lot about where your roster is in 4 years, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But I look at it, Trev, and I'm like, look, he's got a ton to prove. So I buy that. I buy Mario Cristobal. Again, another coach going into year 4. And now, unlike Brian Kelly, Mario Cristobal is actually coming off his best season. So what's interesting when you look at how some people perceive him, it's like last year was considered a disappointment because of how they started and how they finished. But look, they improved. They had a 3-game improvement last year. That's a good jump, in my opinion. So I think when you do that, you're in a situation where it's like, okay, now you've got to at least stay at that level. And you lost a lot of players. You got to show that you can rebuild. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I don't know that there's as much on him as there's Brian Kelly, unless you want to live in the world of, because they've spent so much money, there's expectation, hot pressure, which could be true. Mike Norvell's a no-brainer. You go 2-10. I don't care what you did the year before, 2 years before. You are you've got a lot to prove. And then Kalen DeBoer, for obvious reasons, you replace Nick Saban and go 9-4, and you have a loss to Vanderbilt, a blowout loss at Oklahoma, who wasn't very good, and then you lose to a mediocre Michigan team in a bowl game. Yeah, there's a lot to prove for him. That would absolutely be in there. He listed 4. He said top 5. He listed 4. So I'm going to buy the list he said, Trevor. I'm curious what you think about that. But then who would be the 5th guy that you would add to that list as far as like a top program who has a head coach that has a lot to prove?
Yeah, first and foremost, I buy this list. Salty, I love the wording as far as to prove, because we get a lot of hot seat questions between mailbags and buy-sell holds. I separate this a little bit because most to prove in making the playoffs. The list is actually pretty lengthy. There's arguments for a lot, which I'll dive into here in a second. But these 4, absolutely. The 5th person that I would put in there because of the makeup of their rosters, James Franklin at Penn State. And I know a lot of people are like, well, they made the semifinals last year.
Yeah, made it the Big Ten title game, made the semifinals. That'll be the pushback, sure.
Yep, which is a fair pushback. With that being said, they still haven't won that game. Through all of that, through playing in the Big Ten championship and only having 1 conference loss and making it to the college football playoff semifinal, they don't have that signature win yet. That is still what James Franklin is lacking. And there's a trend in the Big Ten going on right now that in 2023, Michigan returned a lot of their key players from the year prior. They won the national championship. Ohio State, they returned a lot of key pieces from the 2023 season. They elected to forego drafts and the transfer portal. They stuck together. They won a national championship. Now with Penn State, Nicholas Singleton came back. Katron Allen came back. Drew Aller came back. Dennis Sutton came back. All of these guys came back. And so key pieces to this team. Now, I'm not saying that this is a national championship year or bust for James Franklin, but with the makeup of this roster, it's not just get to the playoffs. it is you have to make another run, because along the way you have to get some sort of signature win, whether that's in the regular season and you finally knock off Ohio State, or you're able to beat Oregon. You got to get that, hey, we're here type of win. Notre Dame got that last season with Georgia. It was the, hey, this is the SEC champs. We're going to travel down to New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl and play you guys in prime SEC territory, and we're going to walk away with a double-digit victory. James Franklin and Penn State now need that, so he'll be my 5th coach on this list.
That's an interesting list. I have a few other guys too that I've considered for this, and I thought about Dan Lanning, but I don't know how hard I want to bang that drum, because they still went 13-1 and were the number. Yeah, they got blown out in the first round of the quarterfinals of the playoff, their first playoff game. But it was to the eventual national champions. I don't know that the loss was bad. It was the way that they lost that was bad. Yeah. Still went 13-1, so I don't know that I can quite put him in that category. But like, that thought popped in my head. I don't know that I mean, Lincoln Riley is one that I thought about. Sharon Moore is another guy that I thought about. That's more hot seat conversation for Lincoln Riley, but I do think he has a lot to prove. I do think he has a lot to prove in regard to, hey, we can go out there and we can kind of take that next jump. I thought about Josh Heupel for a minute, but I don't know that there's a lot of angst in Tennessee yet. At least I haven't seen it. There may be. I just haven't seen it. He is doing a good job. They're not really a title contender yet, but they did make the playoff last year. They were pretty darn good 2 years ago. If they had a 12-team playoff in 2022, they would have made it then as well. So he's doing some good things. I think it's too early to have that conversation about Mike Elko. I don't have Lane Kiffin on that conversation, because I think that Lane Kiffin is a little bit of an overrated coach, but I still think he's doing a good job at Ole Miss. And, they don't have a whole lot of 10-win seasons on there. I think Billy Napier is a guy that you could consider. But the guy that I'm going to go with here is, with all the names, there's 2 above all others that I really consider. And one was Shane Beamer, because I think he's done some good things at South Carolina. But can he take that next step? You've got a dynamic quarterback. You've got some big-time recruits, some former 5-star players that you got on your team. The defensive end they have, Dylan Stewart, is an exceptional football player. He's going to be a star, barring injury. He's one. Brett Venables was another. I forgot to mention, somebody in the chat just mentioned, Josh Buffo mentioned him. But Shane Beamer, I think, has a lot to prove. But I think there's one but he's also a guy that's been in the Gator Bowl. They were a playoff caliber team last year. So he's actually done a good job elevating the program. It's just, can he take the next step? Here's the coach to me that has the most to prove. He's not on the hot seat, so it's not a hot seat conversation. He's got the most to prove. Do you know where I'm going to go with this?
My guess is going to be Lane Kiffin.
No, Matt Rule.
Ooh, Matt Rule. I like that.
Yes, because, again, I don't think Matt Rule's on the hot seat, but look, you're going into year 4, or is this going to be year 3 for Matt Rule? What year is this going to be for him? Is this year 3?
Yes,
this is year 3 for him. Yeah, this is 3 for him. This has been his money year at other schools. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. They went 2-10 and 6-6 in his first 2 years at Temple, and then boom, 10-4, 10-3 at Temple. That's quite an accomplishment at Temple. 1-11 in his first year at Baylor, 7-6 in year 2, 11-3 in year 3. Went 5-7 in his first year at Nebraska. It was actually his best first season. Went 7-6 in his second year, which is right on line with what he's done in year 2 everywhere else. 6-6 at Temple, 7-6 at Baylor, 7-6 at Nebraska. Year 3 is the year that everybody's expecting him to make the jump. Now, if you remember last year, the conversation Marcus Freeman was, hey, year 3 is the year that all the great coaches, really made that jump and either A, won a title, or B, in the case of like a Brian Kelly, took him at least to the title game where you saw that big jump, and Marcus Freeman did that. So he did it in year 3. Can Matt Rule? Can he do that in year 3? Can he lead Nebraska to a 9-10 win season and maybe have them going into November in the playoff conversation? With the money Nebraska's spending to get portal guys and with the talent they've gotten through the high school ranks as well, you've got a very talented quarterback. This is a year where Nebraska should make a jump. Now, I'm not talking about playoff. I'm saying like they should be going into November with that conversation because their schedule's not super hard. But this is the year that Nebraska should make a big jump as a program. And if they have another 7-5, 8-4 type of season, you wonder, will the natives get a little bit restless? It won't put them on the hot seat, but I think you're going to start seeing more people question him if he can't do in year 3 at Nebraska. what he did everywhere else in year 3. So that's been my final one of most to prove this season, because, and maybe that's just me projecting my own opinion of Nebraska this year onto Matt Rule, where, look, dude, I think I look at your roster and your depth chart and what you've got coming back and going into year 3, and I'm like, there's no reason for you not to at least be a 9-3 team this year. No reason. Now, I think you will agree with that, Trevor. Now, you're not willing to bet that they're going to go 9-3, but you're at least willing to say, like, yeah, on paper, that team should at least be 9-3. They just got to show me that they can do it, which is very fair. But that's why I say he's got the most to prove at Nebraska this season. So of all the guys I considered, that's why of all those, Matt Rule is the guy that I'm going to go with as my 5th guy on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that pick, and you're spot on with my take on Nebraska. Do I think they can get there? Maybe. Their roster should be in such a way that you would think, but yeah, I like that pick. The only 2 other guys that I really thought about, because I look at this question in a little bit of a different light. I look at some of the coaches that had success last year and have something to prove to, like, back it up where, hey, was this truly like a once-in-a-lifetime season like some people think that it was, or are you actually building something? But then the last guy that I thought about is somebody that did not have a once-in-a-lifetime season last year. That's Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. Of, hey, look, man, you can't be not bowl eligible at a school like Wisconsin. 5-7 at a place like that is just unacceptable. And so I went back and forth with him for a little bit as well. That's a good question, Salty. It's a good way to get us kicked off, man.
Short, sweet, to the point, lots of meat to this one. I loved this one.
Love it. Buy, sell, hold from A. Sokolowski. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but
we're pretty good on that one.
There we go. Buy, sell, hold. Alabama will win the SEC.
I gotta pull up my playoff ranking, Trevor. I don't believe that I have them winning the SEC, but I do have them making the playoff this year. I'm actually going to pull that up right now. I actually believe I have Texas winning the SEC this year. I'm going to try to pull up. I have my playoff bracket here, so let me just pull that up real quick. Yeah, I have Texas winning the SEC this year in my playoff bracket. I haven't changed that yet, but I do have Alabama as my 2nd highest ranked SEC team in my ranking. It would not shock me if Alabama wins a title. So I don't sell it with, like, there's no way that they're going to win the SEC title this year. They're certainly capable of winning the title this year. The reason I'm going with Texas over Alabama is the talent level for the 2 rosters is comparable. Steve Sarkisian in this past season obviously showed he can win in the SEC. Kalen DeBoer has not shown he can win in the SEC yet. And it's also, I have a lot more confidence in Arch Manning than I do whoever the Alabama quarterback is going to be. I'm not one of those people that's on the Arch Manning bandwagon in that, oh, he's an elite player and he's a former number 1 overall recruit. That's not me, Trev. You know my opinion on Arch. I think Arch is a very good player. I think there's way too much hype on him. I think people are asking him to do way too much in his first year as a starter, and I think that's an unfair burden to place on him. But that doesn't take away, like, you can be over, like, if I say that you're the number 3 team in the country, but you're actually more number 10, or if you say they're the number 3 team in the country and I think they're number 10, that's overrated. But if they're really 10th, they're still really good. It's just they're not number 3 good. And that's kind of how I feel about Arch.
Sure.
And, it's what who's going to quarterback going to be at Alabama? Ty Simpson? Is it going to be, Austin Mack? Is it going to be Keelan Russell? Like, who's the quarterback even going to be? We don't know. So that's what holds me back. So I'm confident saying Alabama will be improved this year without jumping into they're going to win the SEC thing. But they are definitely one of my contenders to win the SEC this season. But right now I'm going with Texas.
You and I see that the same, Brian. I do also have Texas winning the SEC. And then, spoiler alert, I have Texas and Alabama playing in the SEC championship game this year in my projections. But each team has very warranted questions, like a lot of teams do, most teams. But with Texas, it's what's their offensive line going to be made up of this year? How are they going to fare in the trenches on both sides of the ball? And then for Alabama, it's who's your starting quarterback going to be?
That's not a question for Alabama, by the way. What you just said about Texas, that's one of the reasons I like Alabama, is because in the trenches, they should be pretty good this season.
Agreed. And if last season was a sample size for things to come for Sarkisian in the SEC, got to get the trenches figured out. Got to find a way to consistently establish the line of scrimmage, especially on offense. And so that matchup is going to be fun to kind of follow as the season goes on. But as of today, on June 18th, I'm going to sell it because I don't have them winning it right now.
Well, I also think, too, the thing that could hurt Alabama is Alabama has a much tougher schedule this year than does Texas. I mean, Texas doesn't have a cakewalk, right? I mean, I'm talking conference schedule.
Yeah.
They play one of the toughest out of conference games they have to play by playing, of the top teams. They have to play at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got to play in conference. They play at Florida. They play at Kentucky. They play at Georgia. None of those are cakewalks, really. Kentucky can be a dangerous team at home, which they showed against Alabama last year. And they can be Georgia. And they showed that as bad as they were last year, they were still dangerous. They almost beat Georgia, and they beat Ole Miss at Ole Miss.
Yep.
So that's not a cakewalk game, even though Texas smacked Kentucky pretty good last year. But Florida at Florida is going to be a tough game. And then at Georgia will be a really tough game. They get Oklahoma on a neutral field, and then the rest of their, and then they got Texas A&M at home, which is in my opinion, just based on my preseason rankings, that's the second best team that they're going to play in conference is Texas A&M, because I have them ranked higher than Florida, but they get them at home. They get Arkansas at home. They get Vandy at home. They get, the rest of their non-conference is pretty easy. But look, if you play Ohio State on the road in the opener, I don't care who else you play in the non-conference. I'm not going to complain about your non-conference schedule. When you've got to play at Georgia, A&M, at Florida, Oklahoma, and you're opening in Columbus, I don't care that you play San Jose State and, whoever else that you're going to do. So you either play two pretty good teams, non-conference, or you play one elite team, and then I don't care what you do after that.
Yep.
So anyway, I think and then when you look at Alabama, Alabama's, to me, schedule is just a little bit more challenging this year. They both have to play at Georgia, but then Alabama has to play at South Carolina. They have to play at Auburn. They get Oklahoma at home. They get LSU at home. They get Tennessee at home. They got to play at Missouri. So it's not like the gauntlet that Georgia has to face, but it's just a little bit tougher than Alabama's. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons too. But I have them in the SEC title game. I just have them losing to Texas as of right now.
Yep. I'm with you.
We had a really good question I mentioned earlier from Silly Goose. Put a really good question on the board, and I asked him, "So are you a board member?" He said he is not. And so obviously he followed the rules of, if you're not a board member, how to get a question up there. So Silly Goose gave us this one, gave us a super chat to get us to bring up his buy, sell, hold, which I thought was a really good buy, sell, hold, Trev. So thank you for the super chat, Silly Goose. I appreciate that. But sign up for the message board, man, and you get as many of these in there as you want. You get great intel, breakdowns, fun, great community. But I thought this was a really good submission.
Yeah, for sure. Buy, sell, hold from Silly Goose. The lack of big game opponents down the stretch will make teams lose focus and come into playoffs unprepared.
I actually think that's a very fair concern for Notre Dame, just without any context. Without any context of any other season, I do wonder what can happen, and do get concerned what can happen to a football team who goes into November out of a bye where your biggest games are in your rearview mirror. Miami's in your rear view, A&M's in your rear view, Arkansas, Boise, NC State, USC, all in your rear view. That doesn't mean there aren't some good teams coming up, but Boston College, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford is not this murderer's row that's going to say, hey, we better be focused because these are some really good teams in front of us. They are teams that, even if some of them are good, are teams that this team is going to look at and say, they're not as good as some of the teams we beat. You do wonder about them looking unfocused or being unfocused. And even if they win out, do they play sloppy football? I think without any context, that's a very fair thing to be concerned about. The reason that I'm going to sell this is because of what we saw last season. Because that's the same thing that I believe happened to Notre Dame in November of last season, which was you play Florida State, Virginia, Army, and USC down, or actually it was the last five was Navy. But just looking at Florida, you had Navy in there for the last five, but just looking at November, it was Florida State, Virginia, Army, and USC. Well, USC is a big rivalry game, but they weren't very good. They were, were they 6-5? going into that game, right? Not very good. And Army's was ranked high, but it's Army. And I think the Yankee Stadium aspect of it played something to that. Notre Dame didn't come out super focused against Florida State. They didn't come out super focused against Virginia. They had some mistakes in those games, won those games handily because they just were way better than those teams. But I don't know that other than the Army game, we saw Notre Dame's best football in November. And they played their second worst game of the regular season, in my opinion, on actually, you could argue their worst game of the season on defense, and arguably their second worst game of the season. It's arguable in the win over USC. As just as a team, but it was primarily because of the defense. And then they had some, uncharacteristic mistakes on offense that they don't normally make, like the fumble by Jaden Thomas, who's always was a very reliable player for Notre Dame. And yet they went into the playoff and smacked Indiana, just came out of the gate pretty hot against Indiana and rolled them pretty good, then beat Georgia and then beat Penn State. So you could say that we've seen them go into November without a gauntlet of a schedule and still be focused enough to win, and then go into the playoff, even though they weren't necessarily playing their best football in the final game, and still go out there and win 3 games. So I'm selling because of past experience. But honestly, Silly Goose, had Notre Dame not been in the playoff last year, let's say it was a 14 playoff and Notre Dame doesn't get in, and now they're expanding to 12, that'd be a legitimate concern of mine. You're not going to get tested in November from what we perceive to be. The other reason that I'm going to sell it to Trevor is, even though there's not any elite teams in November, I think a lot of those teams are still solid football teams, like quality football teams that you're going to have to be ready for. I don't think you're going to be able to sleepwalk going into Boston College. And I don't think the team will look at it that way. I definitely think that Navy's going to be pretty good. And I feel the same way about Pitt. Look, I don't know that Pitt's going to be a great football team this year. They play a pretty challenging schedule for them, but that's still a good football team, and I'm sure that Marcus Freeman is going to remind them of some of the battles against Pitt they've had over the years. And then Syracuse game it's Steve Angeli coming back if he's the starter. I worried less about that game, or I worry more about overlooking that game if Angeli's not the starter. If Angeli's a starter, I have zero doubt that team will be focused for that football game, because you really want to beat the people you don't like. You even more so want to beat the people you respect. And I know that this team respects everything Steve Angeli gave them and the kind of person he was, both the coaches and the players. And, you want to beat the guy down the street, Trev, really bad that you don't like, the guy that talks trash and all that. But you know who you want to beat even more? Your older brother. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of how it is. So, like, that respect factor can even bring out more. So I don't think they're going to overlook that game as well. So the only bad team that we know of right now that's on the schedule in November is Stanford. I think all those other teams will be good enough to keep their interest. So those are the 2 reasons I'm selling. But I think if we didn't have the context of last year's game, Trev, I'd be a little bit more concerned about this being something that pops up in November. What say you?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I agree with all the points that you had laid out. One thing that I'll add is just, look, there's a conversation to be had around you don't want to stack too many big games at the tail end of your schedule, or else the team might come out a little bit wore out, I guess would be a good term. Also because of some of the sample sizes that we saw last season. I mean, look at Georgia's last couple games. 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech to wrap up the regular season, and then a rematch in a physical game against Texas A&M in the SEC championship. And they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs by a team that out-physicaled them in the trenches. You go and you think about, Indiana, not so much. Their tail end of their schedule wasn't all that great. But some of the sample sizes that we saw in last year's playoff, I'm using Georgia as the example here. You don't want to stack too many big games, because then you might have a fear of getting jumped on a little bit. And so I think you have to find some sort of balance here. But Silly Goose, this is absolutely a warranted question for sure, because you have to start thinking about the mental aspect of the game as well. As much as different coaches want to talk about, no, I can get, our team will be prepared the same level as they will for Stanford as they will against, the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. It's just a different beast, and so that it's very warranted for sure. Buy, sell, hold from Do It to It. Just as the NIL era has been good to Notre Dame, this new revenue share will be beneficial, making it easier to set the terms of payment and potentially removing pay-IL.
I'm going to hold on this. And if anything, I would sell it because I'm concerned that the rev share is going to create some issues that aren't there in the NIL era. Because the great thing about NIL right now is in a lot of ways you can kind of remove yourself to a degree from it and be like, well, this is the money we have. This is from outside. But like now that you're directly paying players, there becomes a little bit more of, well, they're paying me, this school's paying me this, or this, the team is paying me this. Well, why are they paying me this? And this guy's getting paid that, where there can create some potential division in the locker room. That's my concern. I don't know that that's going to be true completely because there is some element to the school paying, dictating where NIL funds go now, but it's a different animal now. And now you're in a world where to some degree they're trying to put caps on it, which I think makes it a little bit harder. As you know, Trev, I've said many times, I'm not a fan of putting caps on what players make. If the free market is willing to say, hey, we're willing to pay you, because I don't care what anyone else thinks. I don't care what other businesses think. I think you're worth this for whatever reason. And so I think it's a potential to create some more issues. I think Notre Dame ultimately won't have any problems with the money piece at all. It's more so about what's going on in the locker room. That is my concern. And anytime something new like this happens, even though we've seen it to a degree already, there's always that fear. How do they manage the locker room? That's more of where my concerns are with this. So that's why I'm going to hold it for now, just because I'm not as confident that I know exactly how it's all going to play out. That's why I still wish they would just do the thing where every player gets X amount of dollars from the rev share, split it up evenly between all your players, and then let NIL be NIL. So, but we'll see. What say you, Trev?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you are. I'm going to hold it just because it's an unknown. I want to. Part of me wants to buy this for just the simple fact of just blind faith. I'll be real about that. I was, and this is just me personally, I was really nervous about Notre Dame going into the NIL era and being able to compete with the Oregons of the world, the Georgias of the world, the Alabamas of the world, the Ohio States. Man, they're right up there with them, and they're competing and succeeding. And for me, when I look at what this new era is going to be with revenue sharing, I think that Pete Bravacqua and the staff at Notre Dame has done, and Jack Swarbrick before him have done a really good job navigating this on an NIL era and doing it the proper way and setting the foundation of doing things in a proper way. I just maybe more want to believe that that's going to remain more of the same when the revenue share model is in full effect. But outside of that, I have no other foundation for buying this outside of just pure blind faith. And so I am going to hold this because it is truly an unknown. And all of what Brian's talking about are very warranted concerns. Absolutely. I agree with those 100%. Buy, sell, hold. Once again, from Do It To It, Bryce Young has the best chance of going number one overall of anyone on the roster when the time comes.
Based on upside and positional value, I'll buy this, but I don't buy it with a lot of certainty because Notre Dame's roster now has several players that have elite talent at positions where you will see a guy get taken number one overall. And I'm trying to think. Let me pull up the draft history. Of course, it's not working today, but I'm curious. I'd want to go back and win the last. There's been number one picks at the end in edge players. We've seen it, and more than receiver, for example, in recent years. But number one picks tend to be quarterbacks and offensive tackles, and more often than not, we'll see some D linemen, D tackles, D ends go at times as well. And so he's such a freak athlete, but I also look at it and say, if CJ Carr is as good as we think he'll be, maybe he's in that conversation. Although I don't know that I view CJ as like number one overall draft pick caliber player, But I also feel if like Zach Wilson can go number 2 and Trey Lance can go in the top 5 and Mitch Trubisky can go top 2, that there's a chance that CJ Carr could go number 1. You know what I mean? It's just, how if Daniel Jones is the number 6 overall pick, I think CJ Carr can be, number 1. But then you look at the offensive tackle position. Could a Gerby Lambert become that kind of player? Could a Will Black become that kind of player? Could Charles Jagasaw become that kind of player? Much less so now that he's playing guard. And I don't know that he would have been viewed as a number 1 overall draft pick type of tackle. But the other guys, sure. So I think when you've got players like that at those positions, that creates some of those other opportunities as well. But Bryce Young is an elite talent with elite upside that plays a position of value where you could see it if he was dominant enough. But he'd have to be really dominant to be the number 1 overall pick. But long way between where he is now and being good enough to be the number 1 overall pick. But he's also got some very unique skills that could lead to that. I mean, he's got the DNA, you know what I mean? So his dad was a pretty high draft pick coming out of college. He was the number 7 overall pick. So, that could you imagine that a son being a top 10 pick and his dad being a top 10 pick? That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome. Oh, that'd be so awesome.
We've seen it before, I believe. I believe that wasn't Archie Manning a top 10 pick? Let me go look and see where Archie Manning was picked. I could be wrong on that, but I thought Archie was. Yeah, he was number 2 overall pick. So, Dad was a bum compared to the brothers because they were number 1 overall pick. So, shut up, old man. You were the number 2 overall pick. We were both number 1s. Keep your voice down. We don't want to hear your opinion right now. So. Pretty good quarterback playing that family.
Yeah, I would say pretty good.
Arch is going to go number 5 overall, and they're going to be like, dude, we don't want to hear your opinion. You weren't even the top 3 pick. Shut up.
Make him change his last name.
Yeah, go sit at the kiddie table. You know what I mean? You were number 5 overall. Get out of here with that. So I kid.
Yeah, I love his upside, and I get it. 6'7", 265. The specs are off the charts. I'm going to sell this. I think it's going to be either CJ Carr or an offensive lineman. I do. And the last defensive end edge rusher that was taken number 1 overall was in the 2017 NFL draft when Myles Garrett went number 1 overall. Then before him was Jadeveon Clowney. One hasn't since. Now, the thing working well in Bryce Young's favor in that instance is Myles Garrett in his final season at Texas A&M finished the season with 8.5 sacks and 15 tackles for a loss. Which is very repeatable production for what Bryce Young is able to do. A lot of what Myles Garrett got drafted on, he is a freak athlete. Not that Bryce Young isn't. They are both freak athletes in their own right. Bryce Young is bigger. He's 6'7". Myles Garrett's 6'4". But Myles Garrett has some of the more freaky speed from an edge rusher, something that Bryce could develop into. But right now, the current trend, definitely quarterbacks with how much they're overvalued in the NFL as well. And I expect CJ Carr to have a really fantastic career in South Bend. So that's probably where I would go on this one. But would it shock me if Bryce Young was, has the best chance of going number 1 overall of anybody on the roster? No, I wouldn't be beside myself surprised.
And just so we're clear, we are not predicting that CJ Carr is going to be the number 1 overall pick. Or that Will Black will, or that Bryce Young will. We're simply saying that, if guys reach their full potential, and all of them are a long way away from their full potential, they have that ability to become that kind of player. I always get nervous about answering questions like this when we're talking about a bunch of young guys because it's are you saying that CJ Carr is going to be number 1? No, I'm not saying that at all. I want him to see that he can win the starting quarterback job at Notre Dame.
Thanks.
Then we can worry about, can he beat Miami? Then we can worry about, can he win a playoff game? Then we can worry about maybe, can he be the number 1 overall pick? But it's just simply a projection of what their upside is. But not everybody gets to their upside.
Very true. Buy, sell, hold. 1988 is overmentioned by fans and haters. 2005, 2004, 2001, and 1986 aren't brought up when talking about Texas, USC, Miami, and Penn State.
I don't know. I'm gonna buy that for the most part, but it just depends on the school. I'm not quite sure how to answer this question. if Texas wants to talk trash about Notre Dame having not won a title since 1988, they have the right to do so because they won one in 05. They've won one since then. If USC can say, look, dude, we've won 2 titles since the last time you won a title.
Mm-hmm.
Miami can say, hey, we've won the 3 titles, I think, since Notre Dame won their last one. Penn State fans need to shut the F up when it comes to, pardon my language, but they need to shut up when it comes to, like, you know, trying to trash talk Notre Dame. First of all, Notre Dame beat you the last time they played you, and you haven't won a title since like 1986. So, you know, you need to keep pipe down, pipe down. That is the most delusional fan base out there right now. And like Notre Dame broke a lot of brains in the Orange Bowl this year. Broke a lot of brains. Like, I saw somebody sent me a thread that was going on one of the Penn State boards, and the comment was Notre Dame's selling a lot of – it was something like Notre Dame's selling a lot of smoke and mirrors. And, like, everybody else agreed with it except for one guy was like, you do know they beat us last year and played for the national championship, right? Like, and it was like, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, y'all are delusional. Y'all are absolutely delusional to act like you don't understand why kids don't want to play at Notre Dame. You may not like it, and I don't like it. I don't like that Oregon recruits as well as it does. I don't need to be that smart to understand why kids like Oregon. You know, it's not that hard to figure out. So, I mean, look, you want to shut people up, win a title. It's that simple. And until you win one, like, let's be honest, we as Notre Dame fans, we puff our chest out like Notre Dame's a big-time program because it is a big-time program. But if you want to puff your chest out and brag about how good you think your program is, don't get upset when people that have won a title in more recent years than you want to say, well, you need to pipe down because you haven't won a title since 1988. We'd be doing the same thing if we were a recent title winner and Penn State was running their mouths. Like, I don't say, like, hey, Penn State fans, you shut up because we've won a title more recent than you. That'd be ignorant because Notre Dame hasn't won a title since I was 10 years old. But if you're going to bring the conversation up, I'm going to remind you that Notre Dame has won a title more recently than your program and has beaten you the most time that recent time they played. So it's one of those things, Trevor, where I'm going to sell it because I think it's totally rational for an Ohio State fan to say, oh, you think your program's better than ours? Didn't we just beat you in the title game and haven't we won like 3 titles since your last one? It's very fair. And if the roles reverse, Notre Dame fans would be saying the same exact thing. It annoys me when it comes from people like Oregon fans who have like literally never won a title, or Penn State fans, or fans of a team that like hasn't won in a long time and hasn't even been good in a long time. So that's more of where I'm coming from. So overall, I'm going to sell it, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm with you. Some fan bases just need to have better self-awareness of what their own program is doing before pointing the finger at Notre Dame. So, but I'm in the same boat as you are. If there's a team or a program or a fan base that has won a national championship since 1988, that is where my kind of line of arguing kind of stops. Like, yeah, you're right. You did win in 2017. I got nothing. You did, so I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will have less interceptions, but more sacks this season, with the defense running more zone and already having a reputation of a ball-hawking secondary. Quarterbacks won't trust what they see and hold on to the ball longer.
I'm going to sell that because I think if the pass rush is good enough to do something about this, then it's going to result in more interceptions. And I think – so I'm going to sell this. I don't like. Is it possible that it's going to be less interceptions and more sacks? Certainly. I don't know that I buy that that's the reason why. It could be that the pressure, the more sacks and stuff is coming because they're just better getting a quarterback. But if they're better getting a quarterback, I would argue that that's going to lead to more hurries and more interceptions than necessarily sacks. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think we as a fan base have kind of latched onto this more zone idea and think that 100% of the time Notre Dame's only trotting out in cover 2, cover 3, cover 4. And that's it, and they're not going to play anything else. It's more zone doesn't mean that's all they're going to do. They just want to become a more well-rounded defense, something that they have said, the staff has said multiple times in multiple interviews and press conferences. And plus, man coverage isn't the only way to get interceptions. What I do think you're going to see is more interceptions by the linebackers. That is something I'm confident in saying, because I think in 2 seasons, in 23 and 24, there is only 1 interception recorded by a linebacker in each of the last 2 seasons. Kingston had one last season, and then I think it was Marist might have had one in 2023. Not 100% sure on that, but I think you're going to see more interceptions by linebackers. So I don't know if you'll see a singular safety with 6 interceptions this upcoming season. Not saying it's impossible, but I'm in line with what Brian's talking about. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell this as well. Buy, sell, hold from Ches 2203. The best childhood sports teams of the 90s. Are we buy one, selling one, and holding one? Or are we doing it for all 3? Or
yeah, it's kind of how I took it.
okay.
Best team, I'm gonna buy the Mighty Ducks. I'm gonna hold the Little Giants. I'm gonna sell the Sandlot because they weren't a team. They were a bunch of buddies that played street ball, and they weren't like a real team. They played a real team and smacked them, but they weren't like a team. They were just buddies that played ball together. So, yeah. And then there's a follow up to this one too, Trev, which I actually liked even more.
Oh, love this.
Yeah.
Love this. Buy, sell, hold most dominant player of each team. Benny the Jet Rodriguez, Fulton Reed, Becky the Icebox O'Shea.
Yeah. So I'm going to buy, sell, hold each one for that team. Buy Benny the Jet Rodriguez. He was clearly their best player. I'm buying Becky the Icebox O'Shea because she was clearly their best player. That's not even a question. I mean, she was clearly their best player. But I'm going to sell Fulton Reed. Fulton Reed was the big enforcer guy. Did you ever see Mighty Ducks?
Yep, sure did.
Now, what's interesting is the guy that I think was their best player didn't actually start out on their team. I think it was what was the kid's name? I'm looking the kid's name up because Adam Banks. That's who actually was their best player once he came over. Fulton Reed was their enforcer. He was their hammer, but I don't know that he was their most dominant player. I think once Adam Banks came over and joined the team, he became their most dominant. So I'm going to sell that one. But this is a great question. Just brought me back to my childhood. So very, very well done on that one, Chaz. Very well done.
Very nice. Buy, sell, hold from D-Troll Hunter. You have Syracuse versus Tennessee circled on your upset alert list. Yeah, I think I actually mentioned it. I gave you credit, D-Troll. They are also, we got a question. I don't know if it was a couple weeks ago in a mailbag or a buy, sell, hold, but we got a question about potential upsets in week 1. And that one is now circled on my list. So I'm going to buy that.
I'm going to sell it for the fear of looking stupid because D-Troll Hunter, you've nailed upsets in the first few weeks of the season in the last couple years. But I'm still going to sell it just because I'm still not I still am not sold on that Syracuse roster. Tennessee and Syracuse both lost a lot from last year's roster. They both lost a lot. But Tennessee has more coming back. I think Tennessee is just I don't know, man. I feel the quarterback situation. I mean, you've got 2 talented kids in Ricky Collins and Steve Angeli, who've got a combined 1 career start between them. You know, yeah, Joey Aguilar was at Appalachian State the last couple of years, but he played a lot of football and started against several Power 5 teams during his tenure. So I'm just not quite there yet, Trev, to be able to say, nah, I just got to see a lot more from Syracuse. Were they a one-hit wonder? Is they just kind of everything worked out? You know, I don't think Kyle McCord gets enough credit for how good he was last year in that offense. They lost a lot from their line. They lost 3 of their top 4 pass catchers. Like, they lost a lot, and I don't know that they've completely restocked it to the point where I feel like they're going to repeat that success. I hope they do because Fran Brown's a pretty likable coach in my opinion. I don't need to see it. I need to see it is what I'm trying to say. I need to see what they do. So I'm not quite there yet. And where's let me remind her where the game is. It's a neutral site game, correct? It's not at Syracuse, is it?
I'm not
sure. It's in Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta. So it's going to be a much more pro Tennessee crowd than it would be if they were playing like at Syracuse. So I'm gonna I'm going to sell that. Could it happen? I guess, but I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised. There's other games that I'd be more thinking, hey, there's potential upset in week 1 than that one.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. Arizona State's defensive performance last season is not being talked about enough going into 2025 in terms of their ability to sustain long-term success.
I'm going to sell that because isn't the only thing that matters about Arizona State Sam Leavitt? Because that's all I ever hear anybody talk about when I talk about Arizona State. So I think that's all that really matters. But no, look, I don't know that I'm quite in love with Arizona State's defensive performance last season. I think they were solid, but I don't think they were special. I mean, it was improved. I mean, goodness gracious, they gave up over 30 points a game the year before. They still gave up over 22 points a game last year. I mean, you gave up 23 to a Mississippi State team that's not very good. You gave up 28 to Texas State. You gave up 30 to Texas Tech. You gave up 31 to Kansas. Gave up 24 in a loss to Cincinnati, gave up over 20 against Oklahoma State, gave up 31 to UCF, gave up 23 to BYU, and then you gave up 39 in the playoff in overtime. Great second half performance. And then in fairness, one of Texas's touchdowns was on special teams. So it was the punt return by Bolden. But I don't know that like their defense was opportunistic. They played hard. They're going to have to get better for me to believe that's sustainable. They're going to have to get better. But they made a big improvement to where I think they're at least within striking distance of this being a bye. But I think they need to be better than what they were this season for that to be sort of sustainable long-term success. But they're a whole lot closer now. So there's a lot about what I like from Arizona State last year. And honestly, I did not view their success as fluky from the standpoint of I think you could maybe argue that them getting to the playoff was a little fluky, because they needed everything to go right. There was no dominant team. I mean, Trevor, you've talked about this. What did you say? Something like they were like 6th or 7th? Something like that as far as best odds of making it to the Big 12 title game when November started. Wasn't it something like that?
Yep.
And you needed a lot to go right that was outside of your control, and it did. Everything went right, and then you make the Big 12 title game. But do I find it fluky in that they were way better? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think they were an 8 to 9 win caliber team the way they played last year. Some things broke their way. They won 10 games in the regular season. So I think that I take nothing away from the job Kenny Dillingham did overall when you consider they were 3-9 the year before, and he inherited a mess at Arizona State. And he'd never been a head coach before. And by year 2, he's got him in the playoffs. Like, that's a heck of an accomplishment. If they'd have lost to Iowa State, that season still would have been a heck of an accomplishment from where they were coming from. So I think he's done a heck of a job. But as far as like just long-term success, I need to see a little bit better play from their defense. And I need to see that they can recruit the high school. They can take advantage of last year by recruiting the high school level better, because I still believe you've got to have a good foundation of high school development. On top, like Arizona State's always going to have to need the portal more than Notre Dame does, or maybe
Sure.
Ohio State does. But you need to have that nice blend of still the high school development where it's at least strong enough to where you're going to have some players that have been there for a while. Because here's the problem. Like Detroit Hunter talks about culture. The problem is if you have players that are transitioning out every year or two, it's harder to maintain that culture. You want to know my evidence of that? Go ask Mike Norvell. It's hard to do that. And that's why you need to have a foundation where you're not having to turn over as much of your roster from year to year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You and I see this the same. There are signs of Arizona State's defense improving. There are. I mean, they held Utah to 19. They held Kansas State to 14. They held Iowa State to 19 points in the conference championship game. They finished top 40 in scoring defense, rushing defense, total defense, and in turnovers gained. Now, mind you, when I mean top 40, they were 37th in scoring defense, and they were 38th in total defense. But that's a significant improvement from where they were at, to Brian's point, after the 2023 season. So you guys know me. I need to see it. I need to see it happen for another season. But the signs are there. There have been some little hints of that happening. So definitely get where you're coming from on this one, Detroit. So I'm going to hold it because I don't want to definitively sell it, but I can't buy it either because the sample size is a little small after one season, but the signs are there. So that's where I'm at. Buy, sell, hold. Ryan Wingo, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams.
So D-Troll, you're in the chat. So when you're asking this question, are you asking us in this standpoint? Because you have a couple of these, and it could go in a lot of different ways. Are you looking at this from the standpoint of like buy one, buy one, sell one, hold one, like which I think. So in that case, so let's just say it's buy one, sell one, hold one, and he can correct us if he's looking at it a different way. I would buy Jeremiah Smith. I would hold Ryan Williams and easily sell Ryan Wingo. Like Ryan Wingo doesn't belong in the conversation with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. He's a good football player. I wish Notre Dame would have got him. I wanted Notre Dame to get him. But it's they're top 5 players. He's a top 75 player type of deal. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
You and I see that the exact same. He referenced it in the chat. I want you to buy one, hold one, sell one. Jeremiah Smith, easy buy. Ryan Williams, easy hold because he's, behind Jeremiah Smith. And then I'm with you on Ryan Wingo. So buy, so hold these secondaries: Texas, Ohio State, Alabama.
So this is a very interesting one, Trevor. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because I have a lot to say about these 3. So I want to hear what you have to say first, and then I'm going to give you my answer, see where we're the same and see where we might be different.
This one's tough. I'm going to be honest with you. I need to do a little bit more research on Alabama secondary because I know they're catching a lot of hype coming into this offseason. There's even been some outlets putting Alabama secondary above Notre Dame secondary.
Yeah, all that.
Which I heavily disagree with. Not just because it's Alabama. I would disagree with a lot of schools being ahead of Notre Dame secondary. With that being said, the 2 other ones in Texas and Ohio State, look, I love the fact that Caleb Downs comes back to Ohio State. I mean, he's the best safety in the country right now. But then at corners, I love Jermaine Matthews. I think he's going to have a better season than what Davis Igbinosun's going to have because Iggy holds way too much.
Well, and I definitely think he's going to be better than what Denzel Burke was last year. I thought Denzel struggled a little bit last year.
Yep.
Especially in the regular season.
Yep. Agreed. And then I'm not 100% sure who's stepping in to replace Lathan Ransom. I know Archer's in the chat. And then for Texas, I know they have Malik Muhammad and they have Michael Taffy coming back. I guess if I had to order it right now, and ours could be different, I guess I would go buy Ohio State, hold Texas, sell Alabama, strictly because I don't want to put Alabama above somebody else, and I just haven't done the research on them yet. I think that'd be doing any of them a disservice.
I think so first of all, I believe Jalen McClain's going to start opposite Caleb Downs. I liked Jalen McClain a lot coming out of high school. Like, he was a guy that Notre Dame tried to recruit. He's one of the few, misses that Mike Mickens has had, where, Mickens really liked him, pushed for him, and then just didn't get him. Look, here's what I have to say about this. Alabama's secondary is going to be good this year. It is, but it's getting Alabama'd in that it's because it's Bama and because it's a lot of returners, it's getting this love as if it's like this elite group, and it's a very good group. I mean, these are all 3 really good secondaries. But my thing is okay, well, Alabama's bringing back basically 4 of their 5 starters from last year in the secondary. At least 4 or 5 guys that kind of started a bunch last year. They're going into year 2 of the system, which is a good thing. But I also am this wasn't I think a great secondary last year. I think they benefited from playing some teams that weren't really good throwing the football. And that kept their numbers down. They held Missouri to 72 yards. They held Oklahoma to 68, Alabama to 75, Western Kentucky to 103, South Florida to 103. You gave up 439 to Georgia. Gave up 252 to Diego Pavia, tore that secondary up. South Carolina went for 242 on them. LSU went for 239 on them. They did pick off 2 passes out of the game, and then Auburn had a lot of success throwing the football on them too. They turned the ball. They forced a lot of turnovers. They only gave up 13 touchdown passes. It's a very good secondary, but I just think it's getting a little bit too much hype. I'm gonna the one I'm going to buy is Ohio State. I do like this Ohio State secondary, and I think that you're bringing back a star in Caleb Downs. Davidson Igbinosun is a really good player when he's not holding, but you take that away, he's a very good player. I think Jermaine Matthews is a good player. We'll see what happens in the nickel. I know Lorenzo Stiles and Bryce West and some other guys are battling for that job, but I just think their base starters are really good players. The only question I have about the Ohio State secondary is just how are they going to be in the new system? That's one of my concerns that gives me pause about buying Ohio State of these three, is that right there. Texas is an interesting one because Texas returned some guys that were starters last year. I know Jalen Gilbo played a ton and started last year. Michael Taft played last year. Malik Muhammad started last year. But, they lost their best player. I mean, Alabama brings back their best DBs. Ohio State brings back, in my opinion, their best DB in Caleb Downs, and I don't even think that's debatable. Texas, you could argue, lost their two best DBs. And not only Jahdae Barron, but also Andrew Makuba. And while I expect the Texas secondary to be good, I don't know that Michael Taft is I know he gets more love, but I don't know that I would trade him for a Don Schuler going into year two. I definitely don't think anybody they have is as good as Leonard Moore, proven to be as Leonard Moore. So I'm going to sell Texas. I'm going to buy Bama, and Ohio State and hold at Bama. Having said that, when we do our top 10 DB units breakdown this summer, all three of these teams will be in that.
Yeah.
So we're debating which of three really good secondaries is the best, and the second best and the third best. But you're not hearing me sitting there saying Bama's secondary is garbage. It's not that good. I'm not saying Texas secondary is going to be I'm saying of the three, you're looking for things to nitpick to determine which one's better, and that's why I go with Ohio State. Yeah. But they're all three really good secondaries.
Yep, I'm with you. I am with you. Sticking with the secondaries conversation, buy, sell, hold these secondaries: Clemson, Indiana, Penn State.
Okay, so he's going in with a little bit of a different direction here on this one. Clemson's secondary to me it's the biggest question mark on that team.
Yep.
It could be good, but it could struggle a little bit. And they had their moments last year where it struggled last season. And, Avion Terrell, that's A.J. Terrell's younger brother. He's a really good player coming back. Khalil Barnes had a really nice season the last 2 years as a safety. He's moving down to the nickel position. Ricardo Jones is a really highly ranked player that they got who's going to be stepping in the starting lineup. I like Kylan Griffin. Ashton Hampton's a solid player. They got good talent in the depth chart. Jaden Lucas is former highly ranked player. You got the former D coordinator's son as part of your two deep. It's just they weren't that good last year, and they've got a lot to prove. And so I'm not sure how I feel about that unit. And then when you look at Penn State, Trev, they bring back some good – I think they bring back their best players from last year, in my opinion. They bring back A.J. Harris, who's a pretty good cornerback. I loved him in high school. He was so good in high school. Elliott Washington did not start last year. Jalen Kimball was their starter last year, but Elliott Washington played a lot. He's a good football player. Zaki Wheatley comes back. He had a great performance in the postseason last year. Very good football player. And then they've got a kid named DeJuan Lane stepping their starting lineup. DeJuan Lane, if he was at Notre Dame, would be battling for the starting safety job opposite of Don Schuler. He was a kid that was out, I think, Gilman High School in Maryland that Notre Dame recruited, who I liked a ton. Notre Dame ended up backing off of him because they were in a really good place with a couple other guys, but I liked him a lot coming out of high school. So I like the talent that Penn State has in the secondary. I think that DeJuan Lane is more talented than the kids they had last year. I don't know, the experience obviously going to hurt them, but the talent I like a lot. So I actually think Penn State's secondary has a lot to prove, but I think it can end up being a good secondary this year. And so, of those three, that's the one that I'm going to buy. Then it comes down to Indiana and Clemson, and their secondaries are very similar in a lot of ways. They both have a returning quarterback that's a really good player. They both have a nickel back that comes back that's played a lot of, that's a solid player. Oh, I shouldn't say comes back because I think Indiana's nickel is going to be a transfer. But they've got Amari Farrell. I just have more question marks about Indiana's secondary with what they lost and can they repeat. So even though I think D'Angelo Pons is every bit as good as Terrell, maybe better, I just think the overall talent. And then, of course, with Clemson, it's a lot of guys that played for Clemson last year, as opposed to Indiana that needed to add a couple portal guys. So of those three, I'm going to buy Penn State. I'm going to hold Clemson. I'm going to sell Indiana because that's of their defense. That's my biggest concern as a unit even with the presence of D'Angelo Pons and Amari Farrell, who are good football players and were very good football players last year. It's just, what's the rest of it going to look like? But again, these are 3 quality secondaries on paper. I just like I think Penn State has actually upgraded. Like, Penn State's in a very similar situation to Notre Dame, where there's some young, unproven players, but the actual physical talent of those guys is arguably better than the guys that they're replacing. They're not as good of football players. None of the safeties will be as good of a football player as Xavier Watts was this past season. But I'm not going to sit there and try to pretend like Bronte Johnson and Jadon Blair aren't more physically gifted than Xavier Watts. That's the point. I don't think DeJuan Lane is going to necessarily be as good as like Jalen Reed was last year because he's a younger player, but physical talent is better than what it was. And I think Elliott Washington to me is going to be a better player than what Jalen Kimball was. Kimball was last year for them. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, we see that the same. The Clemson-Indiana conversation is very close. And when I was running through it in my mind, like that was the team that I was having the hardest time with, those two. But you and I have that in the same order. Buy, sell, hold, having one of these elite position groups for Notre Dame in 2025. Offensive line, wide receiver, or defensive line.
If you could tell me that only one of those 3 this season is going to be elite, I would go with defensive line. If Notre Dame is elite on the D-line, but just pretty good in the other 2 areas, the Notre Dame offense is still going to be really good. Because a pretty good offensive line is still better than what they were last year, in my opinion. At least because when I think of pretty good, I think consistent. Last year's was more flashy. We've talked a lot about that. You give me an elite defensive line with what they have at linebacker in the secondary, that's a defense. That's the best defense in college football next year. And that's the kind of defense you can ride to a title.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of defense Ohio State's going to have a tougher time against this year. Will Howard threw from way too many clean pockets in the championship game last year.
Sure did.
And there were too many just gaping holes in the run game. And not consistently, but just those gash plays that they had. If Notre Dame's D-line is elite this year, what does that mean? It means Boubacar's healthy and playing like we expect him to play. It means Bryce Young, who we talked about earlier, is playing at elite level. Josh Burnham takes his game to another level. And the D tackles we talk about stepping up. Onye's every bit of as good as we think he's going to be. Dawson is every bit as good as he was at Louisville, if not better. Armel Mukam breaks out. Rubio has that consistently strong year. That's what that means. And if we already believe they have an elite linebacker room, we already believe they have an elite secondary. If you give them an elite defensive line, it makes those units even better. And I don't know how you beat that team. I think they're going to be a pretty good defensive line and potentially an elite O-line. But if it's reversed, I think that has an even greater impact. Because with Jeremiah Love and the talent they have at receiver and other positions, if your line's just pretty good, like look what Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price did last year with an offensive line that was just good. It wasn't even really good. It was just good. And at times it wasn't good, but it was just good. I don't want to hear, oh, no, it was they were Joe Moore Awards. I don't care. That was on reputation. This is the same offensive line that also got destroyed by Northern Illinois. And, this is the same offensive line that couldn't open up run lanes in the after the 98-yard touchdown run, they went another 3 games before they opened up a run lane for a running back to run through. It was a lot of reasons why. Starting left tackle got hurt in camp, and then Shrouth goes down. There's a lot of reasons why, but we can still look at it and say it was a good offense. It was a solid offensive line, but it wasn't a great offensive line. If it's just really good next year, that's improvement. That's better than it was the year before. And we saw what that team is capable of with a just kind of average offensive line at times in 2024 that would show flashes of being really good. And certainly no consistency. That is not Joe Rudolph's fault. You can't control that Jagasol got hurt and Craig got hurt and Shrouth got hurt. You can't control those things. That's not on you. But it still is the result is the result. This isn't meant to take a shot at Joe Rudolph. I actually think he did a pretty solid job when you consider what they had to go through last year to keep that thing even just going.
Yeah.
Yes, there was personnel mistakes we've talked about, but we can make those criticisms and still say, but he also did these other things pretty well. But so if they're just pretty good this year, if the receiving core is pretty good this year, but not elite, the Notre Dame offense is going to be elite, in my opinion, because you're elite at running back. You've got talent at tight end, and you've got talent at quarterback. And if the receiving core is just pretty good, that's an upgrade over what it was last year. But if that D-line is elite, I don't know how you beat Notre Dame. I really don't. You're not going to be able to score on them. And I don't know how you beat that team. So I'll take the D-line. I know that a lot of people disagree and say O-line. It's not saying the O-line is going to be bad. It just says which one of them has to be elite. So I'd buy the D-line. I would hold the O-line because that's my second one, and then receiving core would be who I would sell. I don't need them to be elite at all for Notre Dame to win a title next year. They can't suck, but they don't have to be elite either. If they're just good, that's a good group of pass catchers with all the other talent. This team's going to be really, really outstanding.
I am almost about as dead even on offensive line and defensive line. If I'm looking at this, I loved your argument with the defensive line, and I could not agree more. And then I start thinking about the offensive line, and it's like, yes, they performed really well last year, but they're not going to have an athlete like Riley Leonard to kind of maybe help buffer some of the pass protection numbers as they did last year. Because when I look at this, I think about, look what Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and look at some of the offensive output numbers were last year with just a good offensive line. That's also how I feel about last season with the defensive line. I don't think Notre Dame's defensive line in 2025 was elite. Also not their fault. It's not Al Washington's fault that Boubacar got hurt and Mills got hurt and Botello got hurt. And, the list goes on.
Rubio was out. Onye's out after game 5. Rubio misses like 5-6 games. I think he did a phenomenal job when you consider all those things.
Absolutely.
But they weren't an elite D-line. And I think everybody at Notre Dame will tell you that. In the playoffs, they were not an elite D-line. They played their butts off, gave you everything they had, but they weren't an elite D-line.
Yeah, 100%.
Against Georgia. But in the other 3 playoff games,
they weren't. Man, I'm telling you. But then I start thinking about the success that the linebackers had last season and the success that the corners and the secondary had last season. But then when you kind of gave your argument for the D-line, it's like, how much better will the linebackers be this upcoming season with the D-line the way that it is? It's like I think we can agree that both the running backs and the linebackers will be better this upcoming season, but marginally, I think you're going to see a bigger jump from the linebackers from improved D-line play than you will a jump from the running backs and improved offensive line play. My argument for the offensive line is more pass protection. So after thinking about it, I'll go buy D-line, hold offensive line, sell wide receivers. I'm in the same boat as you are, but it's close.
The offensive line doesn't need to be elite to be a lot better than it was last year.
Sure.
That's my point. And like to your point, you're going down the road of making a great point, Trevor, and before you kind of veered off like, yeah, okay, I know what I'm trying to say, but it's still D-line. But if you'd have kept going down that point and stuck with buying the O-line because an elite pass protecting offensive line, what it means for CJ Carr, an elite run, it's a very valid argument to make. And if you were to say, I'm going to buy O-line, I'm not going to be like, au contraire, mi amigo. Like it's a valid point. And it's not a big difference. I just look at it and say, which one has a bigger burden? Sure. And if the O-line's great and the D-line's not, then that has can potentially have it better be great because the teams are scoring a little bit on you. But if you have an elite defensive line, your offensive line plays the same way it did last year. You're still going to go as far as you did last year because you're going to hold a lot of teams to 10, 12, 13 points.
Sure.
And that's the difference. But I think the offensive line and receiving core will be improved. But I look at this and just start thinking about, like, how do you score on Notre Dame if their defensive line's elite next season? Which takes so much pressure off of the offense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
Hopefully it's if we're debating at the end of the year which one's more elite, then that's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Yep. Buy, sell, hold. Having the biggest impact on the national title. Penn State's wide receiver room upgrades, Notre Dame's first-time quarterback, or Clemson's returning experience.
So he went positive, negative, positive. So like looking at it from different standpoint, I like that. It's an interesting one. Of those 3, I think the biggest impact on the national title is going to be Notre Dame's quarterback.
Yeah.
Because I think Notre Dame is, of those 3 teams, is the most talented team. I believe that. Yes, I cover Notre Dame, but that's my honest opinion. I would tell you if I thought otherwise. It does me no good to make that type of bold statement like I made a month or so ago. And then if I didn't actually believe it and was like super biased. And then they come out and they go 8-4 and people are like, this guy's an idiot. Like it's not good for business. I say it because I truly believe it. The biggest potential holdup, other than like things you can't control, injuries, things along those lines, is can your first-time quarterback avoid the pitfalls that can come with some first-time players and let the story be about his talent. Like if the story at the end of the year is about Kenny or CJ's talent and not their inexperience, then that means Notre Dame had a great year and will be a legit title contender. I think all three of these are why these teams are in my top 6. Or at least for the other two. Penn State's receiver room upgrades are why I'm willing to say I think they are a team that could win the Big Ten this year. But I don't know that they've done enough to address some of the other things that keep them from being a true title contender the way that some other teams are. And Clemson's returning. So I would buy Notre Dame's quarterback. I would hold Clemson's returning experience, and I would sell Penn State's wide receiver room upgrades because I don't think that was necessarily their biggest issue last year. It was their biggest issue against Notre Dame because Notre Dame has an elite secondary. But I think some of the bigger issues for them are how do they replace Tyler Warren? Can their defense be a little bit more consistent against some of the better teams? I mean, second half against Notre Dame, their defense was Swiss cheese. I mean, other than Riley Leonard's just bad mistake, they didn't really do much to stop Notre Dame in the second half of that game. And if you think about it, Notre Dame scored 27 points in the last 31 minutes of the game. And that was with a bad turnover from Riley Leonard.
Yep.
So you look at what they did against Oregon, for example. You look at what they did in the first half against Bowling Green, the first half against USC, some pretty mediocre football teams. Like, they've got to get better there, more so than receiver. And but the receiver upgrades do help them, certainly. And I think they will be a better receiving core this year, but I don't know that it's going to be astronomically better because I don't think the receiving core is as bad as people made it out to be last year. I think part of it was just, a bunch of guys in the first-year offense and,
sure.
Quarterback that wasn't always as comfortable making some certain throws in certain times. And then you also had a aspect of you're trying to feed an elite running back room and the best tight end in college football. You're trying to feed those guys. So the receivers were more compliments. And, I mean, there's a couple times in the game against Penn State where if Drew Aller makes a better read, the receivers catch 3 or 4 balls. They still got dominated, but they wouldn't have been shut out with some better decisions.
Yeah.
But, and also part of that's on the play caller. Like, you can't come up with one perimeter screen pass to Amari Evans or something like that. Like, nothing. Okay. It's interesting. But
fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. Surprise ACC title candidates: Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Virginia Tech.
This is the easiest one. Buying for Georgia Tech. Like, I really like this Georgia Tech team. If they can figure out their lines, I really like this football team. I'm going to hold on Virginia Tech just because there's things about Virginia Tech I really like and things about Virginia Tech that really concern me. But if they can figure out a way to get Kyron Drones going, they had a couple really nice pickups in the portal. One of them being Donovan Green. So if you remember Donovan Green from Wake Forest, Trev, Donovan Green 2 years. So when I mean 2 years ago, I mean like 23, or was it 20? Was it 22? What was the year? Let me look it up. There was a Donovan Green, I think it was 22, was like a really good player for Wake Forest. Like, he was coming along, he was ascending, he was going to be a really good player. And then he had a knee injury. He had 37 catches for 642 yards, 6 touchdowns and 22 with Sam Hartman. That was the year they had A.T. Perry, Jamal Banks, Taylor Moore, Keyshawn Wynn. That was a big-time receiving core. Then he tears his knee up in 2023 and doesn't play. Comes back last year, not the same player, only played 8 games, was a little banged up, missed some chunks in the season, had a big game against Virginia, was never the same player. If he's healthy and Kyron Drones can be the guy that I thought he was going to be last year, this team on offense could be a much improved. And they also got Cameron Seldon from Tennessee, who's, got a chance to be a nice complementary player for them, as they try to figure out what position he's going to play. But I look at it, Trev, because he played a lot of running back at Tennessee, and I think they're going to play him a receiver. From what I'm reading, they're going to play him a receiver this year. But, their defense added some good portal players. Like, there's talent at Virginia Tech, man. They just underachieved last year. And they just did. They were such a weird team because there's weeks where you're like, dude, they took Miami down to the wire in Miami. Should have beat Miami. I think got screwed at the end of that game.
Agreed.
Smashed a decent Marshall team and blew out Stanford and blew out Boston College, beat Georgia Tech by double digits, blew out Virginia. And then they lose a 3-point game to Duke. They lose by a touchdown at Syracuse. They lose in the last seconds at Miami. The home loss to Rutgers was bad. They fall down big early to Vanderbilt, come all the way back, take a lead, and then fade late. They were don't do that dumb thing here, don't do that dumb thing here, away from being a 10-plus win football team. Now, I don't know that they can fix those things to get better, but I just have a lot more confidence in that roster and the schedule than I do Syracuse. Syracuse's defense was not good last year, and their offense had to score a bunch of points. Gave up 41 points to UNLV. They lost a lot from that defense, and now they don't have the players that bailed them out last year are all gone. And I don't know that it's a given that they're going to be able to just replenish that. So, like, when Kyle McCord came over, he was thrown to a bunch of guys that had played together for a bit. And now it's you're going to have a new quarterback, and you're going to have a bunch of new receivers that haven't played together before. So I just think that's going to be a bit of a tough deal. I mean, Trevor Pena was a fifth-year player last year. He was a Syracuse lifer. Rondé Gatson was a Syracuse lifer. He had been there the entire time. So, again, it's not everybody wasn't that way. Jackson Meeks was a guy that transferred in. But a lot of the guys they had, Darryl Gill was a guy that was recruited and developed at Syracuse. So it was a bunch of guys that were Syracuse guys. Well, now it's a portal team this year. That's not what it was last year on offense. So I'm not as high on Syracuse as others. And so easy by Virginia Tech or Georgia Tech. Virginia Tech is a sleeper team for me this year, and then I'm selling Syracuse. What say you, Trevor?
You and I see that the same. Georgia Tech is my easy buy. Love Haynes King and Jamal Haynes coming back. I think that's a very underrated backfield overall that not a lot of people are talking about. Trenches, you got to get that figured out. Virginia Tech, love all the points that you brought up. And then for Syracuse, you and I see that the exact same. If you take, not you personally, but for people who are bigger believers in Syracuse than what you and I are, if you take out Steve Angeli's transfer to Syracuse, I wonder how many people would still be as high on the Syracuse team, given everything that they had lost. And so I'm in that order: buy Georgia Tech, hold Virginia Tech, sell Syracuse. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame's kicking game is still your biggest concern going into fall camp.
No. I mean, look, Notre Dame played for the title last year and had one of the worst kicking operations I've ever seen for most of the year, regular season. Like, best way to not have to care about kicking is score touchdowns and don't let the other team score. Sure, it's a concern, and I don't know that I trust Noah Burnett in the playoffs is the way that I trusted Mitch Jeter because he was healthy. But no, it's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is still what we talked about earlier. Will the line play make the jumps? Like, look, neither Notre Dame line played great last year. There was a lot of reasons why, beyond control of the coaches. I mean, there's nothing Joe Rudolph did to get Charles Jagasaw injured or Ashton Craig injured or Billy Schrouth injured. So, yeah, I got some beefs with this thing and that thing, but, like, it doesn't – if those guys get injured, the offensive line's a lot better last year. A lot better. If Boubacar doesn't get hurt, if Jason Onye doesn't leave, if Gabriel Rubio was more healthy, if Riley Mills doesn't get hurt in the playoff, that's a much different defensive line playing against Ohio State and Penn State in the last 2 games. But that's not what the reality was. The reality is, for the key for me is still, can the lines play to their potential and rebound after 2 injury-plagued seasons? And that's the big one for me. And then my next big concern is still the quarterback position. I'm still more concerned about that than I am the kicking position, because you got to find out who's going to win the job. Is the staff going to handle it correctly? We don't know. We don't know how this staff is going to handle a young first-year quarterback, and if he struggles early. We don't know the answers to that. Are they going to handle that well? I don't know the answer to that. I'm hopeful, but I don't know. So there's far more unknowns for me with the quarterback position and how that's going to be handled or concerns than kicking. That's just, I mean, if you think about it, 2 of the 4 Final Four teams I know for sure had kicking problems last year.
Texas sure did.
Exactly. So did Notre Dame. I don't know. I don't remember Ohio State really needing its kicker to do a whole lot last year. So he went 13, but Jaden Fielding, I'm looking at it now, 13 of 17 on field goals, and as a team went 76 of 76 on PAT. So they were fine there. Penn State's kicking operation was fine. Notre Dame's was a hot mess in the regular season. Well, after the first game, it became a hot mess in the regular season, and then got better in the playoff when Mitch Jeter got back to good health. But they were killing teams and missing extra points and kicks and all that kind of stuff. So, that's kind of where I'm at. And Penn State also last year struggled early in field goals. Their starting kicker went 2 of 5, and then their special teams coach Justin Ludwig made a change. Lustig made a change. Put Ryan Barker in as a freshman who went 15 of 18 the rest of the way. They found their kicker. You know what I mean? So Notre Dame still beat them. You know what I mean? So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about it.
No, the kicking game is relatively low on my concerns list. It's there, to your point, Detroit, but it's not ahead of overall health of the team. It's not ahead of the quarterback competition. It's not ahead of who's going to be starting alongside of Don Schuler at safety. It's not alongside the continued implementation of Chris Ash's defense. But it's there. I'll give that to you. It is there on the list. Then buy, sell, hold. Spring football, summer workouts, or fall camp?
Buy.
Heard that.
I mean, honestly, I this is one I'm going to say I refuse to do it for this one, because they're all so important. And so I'm always going to buy the season they're in. So right now I'm buying summer workouts. In about a month and a half, I'm going to be buying fall camp. They're all integral to your development as a team. And if you struggle in any of them, it's going to stunt your development as a program. And I would even argue maybe the biggest arguable buy you could make is not even on here. And that's winter workouts. That's where the foundation of your team is truly laid. And then you build on it with all those other things. So I think they're all vitally important. So this one, I'm going to cheat a little bit, Detroit Hunter, and say I'm buying all of them.
Heard that. Buy, sell, hold from Aiden Benami. Botello getting hurt is actually a plus for Notre Dame's defensive line and will give them a huge boost of energy for the end of the season and into the playoffs, such as Rubio last year, but maybe more.
I'm going to sell that, because I don't think that's a plus. I think what a plus would be Botello's healthy all year. You don't have to put the extra reps on the young guys early, and they're still fresh and have a boost of energy in the postseason. That's the other way to do it. I don't think you need a guy to miss half the season to have that boost of energy. Did getting Rubio back last year help? Yeah, but I would argue that Rubio not playing the first 6 games is partly why Howard Cross and Riley Mills wore down a little bit late in the year. Well, I shouldn't say Riley Mills didn't wear down until he got hurt, but I think it's a big reason why Howard Cross wore down late in the year, because he had to play too much early because you didn't have Rubio. And then when you lost Onye, you were really in trouble. And then when you got Rubio back, okay, it's great they got Rubio back, but at the same time they got Rubio back, they lost Onye. So it really wasn't like the boost that we think it was. I just think the best thing for this team is to be healthy so they can keep a heavy rotation throughout the entire year. That's the best thing. Now, I'm also not going to ignore that if Patelho can come back healthy, it might not be a positive. What I will say is I think Patelho's pec injury, if he can come back 100% from that particular injury, could be a boost for him because it just gives him more time to work the knee back to health and not be as in many football situations where he might be getting his knee rolled up on in fall camp and things like that. For him, I think it's a positive. But for the team, I still think having the deepest rotation possible early is what allows you to have energy in November, December, and January. So that's why I'm going to do that one.
Fair enough.
I'm going to do the next one because this is more about you, Trev. Trev brought up a great point last week about the pec injuries. To that point, there is no concern on several pec injuries, strength and conditioning wise.
I'm going to sell this. No concern. I mean, you're talking about 4 pec injuries all along the trenches in the last calendar year. Charles Jagasaw last season. In winter workouts this year, you had Davian Dixon, an early enrollee true freshman, have that same injury. Gerby Lambert had a similar type of injury to what Charles Jagasaw had, and now Jordan Patello. And it's all amongst players along in the trenches. And so I'm not going to say there's no concern. That's where I'm at with it. I'm selling because I don't think that there's no concern. I think it's something that is getting addressed, but something that I think needs evaluated, and just seeing, is it a workload management thing? Is it a weight thing? I don't know, but that's one for me that I'm keeping an eye on.
So Gerby had a labrum injury, which is a little different. The other thing with Patelho is his injury didn't even happen during a Notre Dame workout. It happened away from the program. Anytime you have a rash of injuries at a position is something to be concerned about. This one I'm particularly not concerned about because they were all done in where I'd be concerned, Trevor, is if they all happen in a similar setting. They were all weight room injuries. That would concern me. Jagasaw's is a freak thing that was happened during a scuffle during a play, from what I understand. It was in practice. And Dixon's happened, I believe, during a weight room thing. That was also, there was something that he kind of had previous. And then I don't know how Patelho hurt his because he was away from the team. So I'm not going to push back on people that have some concerns about it. It's fair. It's just not to the point for me where I'm concerned about it because they're happening in different situations. If they were happening in the weight room, then I'd be a little bit more concerned about it. But there were pec injuries under Matt Balis as well. I mean, just when you're pushing yourselves to get bigger, stronger, faster, sometimes those things are going to happen. Now, if we get maybe 2 more in the next few months, then I'll get concerned. But I'm just not quite there yet.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold from Aiden Benami. The 26th class will be complete before December, a.k.a. no last-minute waiting to signing day or close to it.
I'll say buy. I think this class will be done by the time we get to December. So I'll buy Trev what he's saying. It's not waiting to the last minute on some guy that they've been recruiting for months like Mad Framo last year. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Notre Dame may not try to flip a kid late, though. And it not be like a need. But let's say that Notre Dame has a great year. And let's say that Mike Brown reaches out to some really talented recruit, some really talented receiver recruit. So let's say they get Caden Finley and they get Devin Fitzgerald. And they get their 4. And 4 is the number, it's the target number. But let's just say hypothetically that there's some guy that breaks out and has like a monster year, and he's like a 5-star type of guy. It's a Chris Henry type of guy, Tristan Keys type of guy, that for some reason Mike Brown reaches out and they're like, this guy's just too good not to recruit. And they have a shot to flip him. Could they do that? Let's say that there's some stud D-tackle breaking out or some D-tackle that loves what Notre Dame's doing. Could there be a flip like that? Sure. But I think for the most part, Notre Dame would be done by the time I would argue that they're going to be done by the time we get to the end of September at the latest. They could be done this summer. And they really could, other than trying to flip some guys. Like if let's say Al Washington gets Elijah Golden to commit in August. Let's just say hypothetically he does. And I'm not saying he will, because there's a lot of work to be done there. But let's just say he does. Why should Al Washington stop recruiting Drake Quinn just because he commits somewhere else? I would. I'd still recruit him. So I have no problem with some of those things happening. We're like, dude, we love this kid. We want to flip him. Well, if I'm at Washington, even if you get Elijah Golden, I'd still say, well, man, if Alistair Viejo wants to still contact me, I'll still talk to him. There's some linebackers that Notre Dame missed out on and they're fine at linebacker, that I wouldn't necessarily like say, hey, we're not going to talk to you anymore. So most of those positions, Trev, I think they're going to be done. But you're done at running back, you're done at quarterback. But if Ian Premer goes to Kansas State, I'd still keep recruiting him. Why not? Especially if you think Eli Raridon is going to have the season he's going to have, because I think Ian Premer could look at Eli Raridon and say, that guy's a lot like me as an athlete. So, we could see a flip like that happen, sure. But I don't know that I look at it and say there's going to be any guys on the board now like a Madden Farema who are going to take the recruitment all the way to December. I think most of the guys that Notre Dame is on now, if not all of them, are going to be summer decision guys.
By so hold, the players are still in the gym 4 to 5 days a week in the summer.
Believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Summer's a very intense workout time. It's a different type of workout. It's not the same as like the winter workouts, but yes.
By so hold from Aiden Benami. Yes, college football is a business and kids can do what they want and visit what schools they want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you would still feel some type of way or be upset if a committed kid takes an official visit to another school and does a photo shoot and all buddy-buddy with those school recruits and posting pictures of the shoot.
I'm going to sell this as a universal feeling, because it's like with anything, Trevor. It depends on the kid and it depends on the reason why. I had no problem with Thomas Davis going to Georgia and taking that visit and doing a photo shoot. No problem with it. If anything, I'm like, could you imagine going back to your dad's alma mater where he was a great player and like getting to put on the jersey and all that? I think that'd be a pretty cool experience. I can't fault the kid for wanting to do that. I probably would have had a harder time saying no to my dad if we were in a similar situation. So I don't have fault for that. I think where I would have an issue with it is if it, and the other thing about Thomas Davis, and this is, I've been told this by multiple people, but Thomas Davis was upfront and honest and in constant communication with Notre Dame about his visit plans and everything going on. And that's different than, let's say, Deuce Knight, who went and visited Auburn and didn't want people to know about it, tried to hide it. That's when you're like, okay, I have a problem with that. Like, just be a man about it. Thomas Davis was a man about it. And then he comes and visits Notre Dame a couple weeks later and loves it. And mom and sister are there rocking Notre Dame gear, and dad's rocking Notre Dame gear, and they're bought in. But I think it would be cool for a kid to go put on his father's uniform. I think that's a pretty cool deal. Or put on the uniform of the school his dad played for is more of what I mean. But I have no problem with that one. There's other kids that do it that I have a little bit of an issue with. The other thing too is sometimes these kids, they'll go there and trying to build relationships with kids. Now, I don't think it's appropriate to recruit kids to the school you're committed to while on a visit. I think that's disrespectful to the school that's kind of hosting you. But building a relationship with a kid that the committed school you're looking at is recruiting, and then turning that connection you made there into a post-visit, hey, man, we connected. Why don't you come join me over here? I have no problem with that. And sometimes that happens. But at the end of the day, my big ask for young men is to be honest. Be honest and upfront. Be a man about own your actions. And Thomas Davis, in this instance, owned his actions. He was a man about it. He told the coaches, this is what's going on. He was honest in his conversations. I have no problem with that. None at all. I didn't feel uncomfortable with it, meaning as a Notre Dame fan, you don't want him to decommit. But anytime a young man is honest and owns his decisions and owns his choices and is upfront and is in constant communication, I don't have a huge problem with that. with a kid taking an official visit somewhere. Now, if the coaching staff was like, hey, we don't want you to do this for reasons A, B, C, and D, and the kid says, I'm doing it anyway, that might be a little bit of an issue. But again, there's circumstances where I have a problem with it, circumstances where I don't. So I'm going to sell that because overall, it just depends on the context. But in any of these, I would say this is the third biggest decision that a young man will make in his life, behind turning his life to Jesus, finding a spouse, and this. These are life-altering decisions, Trevor. Life-altering decisions. If a kid wants to go through the experience a certain way, whether it's because I just want to experience it, I want to have fun, or it's, hey, I committed early and I'm having some doubts. I want to go through this. And sometimes it's going through it that makes you more solidified in what you're going through. I mean, I look at my marriage, the toughest time that my wife and I went to, it was a multi-year dark cloud of our marriage. I don't know that our marriage is as strong as it is now had we not gone through that, because we learned so much about each other and we learned so much about ourselves, and it made us better spouses with each other. And it gave me more clarity coming out of it that, yes, this is the right woman for me. I did not make a mistake. These were my issues, not her issues. And she did the same thing. And so sometimes it's those moments of doubt where you go down them and explore them, that you come out saying, you know what? That grass is definitely not greener on the other side. I'm confident in my decision. I'm comfortable in my decision. And if that's the process some of these young men need to take, as long as they are men about it, and that requires honesty, integrity, and doing things a certain way, so that way you're not screwing the school over, then I have no problem with it. Like when Urban Meyer asked Justin, I think it was Justin Tradow, I think is who it was. Remember him from Notre Dame, who was committed to Notre Dame? Urban Meyer basically tried to get the kid to lie and say, don't tell Notre Dame you're visiting Florida. Like, why would you want to play for a guy like that, number one? But, like, that's when I got beef with you. I got beef with the way Deuce Knight handled his recruitment. I got no beef with the way Dante Moore handled his. I don't like the result, but Dante was always honest with Notre Dame about where he's going to go and where he's going to visit. And I have more issues with the way his dad handled his recruitment than I do Dante. Very different situations. If a kid's going to flip and commit, he's going to flip. Hey, Kenny Minchie, I'm glad Kenny Minchie went back on the school he was committed to. Worked out great for Notre Dame. There's been a lot of really good Notre Dame football players that were once committed to someone else. Will Fuller was committed to Penn State. I'm glad that Notre Dame stuck with him. I'm glad he made the visit. I'm glad he came to Notre Dame. All I ask is be a man about the process. Talk to the coaches that you're committed to. Give them the respect that you would want them to give to you. Talk to them. Let them know what's going on. Be honest about it and be upfront with it. And if you have a change of heart, be upfront with them as early as possible. Let them know what's going on. It's all a learning process. But to say if a kid takes a visit, just no matter what, I got beef with it, I can't go there with you. Because I just don't look at recruiting as emotionally as I used to. I don't. That's why I tell people, get off the roller coaster. Just enjoy the ride, but like get off the ups and downs of it. It's okay to be happy, but just get off the like right now, Notre Dame's crushing it in recruiting. Looks like it's going to go great. 2 weeks ago, our board's just going nuts about how bad it is and momentum in this. Remember that? It was a week ago, actually. I'm like, guys, get off the roller coaster. And just what matters is who they get at the end of the day. That's what matters. Not who they might have got, could have got, whatever. It's who'd you get. Is this class good enough? And that's, to me, ultimate matters. So I don't care what the journey a kid is. As long as the kid is definitely sold that Notre Dame is the place to be, there's a much greater shot that he'll stay at Notre Dame for a longer period of time, as opposed to a kid who just felt obligated to stay committed because he felt like it, even though he was having doubts. Because the first time that kid goes through a tough time at Notre Dame, he's out. Because he was never completely sold on the first. And that's true for any school. If a kid is not certain of his decision and then doesn't go through the process of finding clarity and certainty, then that doubt never goes away. When things go bad when he's there, he's gonna be more prone to leave. So that's why I look at it a little differently.
Yeah, big picture, I'm selling this. As long as it's done the right way, I have no issue if a kid wants to go take another official visit at a school, because Brian brought it up, and this is a life experience. If I had a kid that was a blue chip recruit that was going through this recruiting process, I would want them to do their due diligence and leave no stone unturned. And if a photo shoot is something that they wanted to do, then that's fine with me. In no way does that bother me. I get it from a fan aspect. When somebody takes a visit to Notre Dame, you only want them to only ever visit Notre Dame ever again. And every graphic that's put out on Twitter, it only needs to be in a gold uniform, holding a gold brick like a phone, sitting in a gold locker room. I get it. I understand that. But at the end of the day, these are kids. These are 16, 17-year-old people. And I think sometimes that can get kind of lost when we think about college football. And we just take for granted, it's like, well, they're athletes. They play for my favorite school, and this is the only thing that they can do now. And that's just not the case, unfortunately. I understand how quickly it is to fall into that perception of some of these kids, but in no way do I have issues with it, barring it's done the right way. There's constant communication. It's an open process. None of this under the table. Hey, let's keep this a secret. Let's book some secret flights type of deal. But if a kid is going and taking pictures and doing a photo shoot at an official visit, they know that it's not going to be kept a secret. And so that's where I'm at with this one. So I'm selling. Buy, sell, hold from B Jam in 41. A good comparison for Devin Fitzgerald coming out of high school would be Corey Robinson, but with a higher ceiling.
I don't think that's a bad one, B Jammin. I get where you're coming from. Tall, lanky, high upside, child of a famous athlete. I don't know that their games are similar. I think they have very different games. I think if you're wanting a comp for Notre Dame, I think if Devin Fitzgerald's the player I think he is, he can be 2020 Javon McKinley. That's a really good football player. 2020 Javon McKinley was one of the most underrated Notre Dame receivers the last 20 years. That dude was clutch that year. They didn't throw the ball a ton, which is why his numbers weren't great. But 2020 Javon McKinley was a pretty good football player. And 42 catches, 717 yards, 3 touchdowns, 17.1 yards per catch. Like that type of player, similar body type, boundary guy, not a burner, but fast enough to make plays, great body control, great hands. Yeah, I could see that. I think that's what he could be. 2020 Javon McKinley. And I'm talking more style of play than I am production, because he may have less yards per catch, more catches. Who knows what the makeup of the offense will be? I think Javon McKinley in an offense that was a little bit, threw the ball more effectively and more, consistently, puts up even better numbers. But that's the kind of player I see for him.
Buy, sell, hold from B Jam in 41. Buy one, sell one, hold one. Oregon upsets Penn State. LSU upsets Alabama. Louisville upsets Miami, and West Virginia upsets BYU. Oh, buy, sell, hold each one. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So buy, sell, hold each one. I mean, I certainly buy that Oregon can upset Penn State. That's an easy buy. I think that's a pretty easy buy. LSU upsets Alabama. I'm selling that. It's in Tuscaloosa, correct?
Yes, it is.
So I'm gonna sell that. I mean, look, they beat Alabama in year one. Brian Kelly did his first year. They beat Alabama at the end of the game it was one of the best in-game calls Brian Kelly's ever made.
Legit.
Was scoring that touchdown instead of trying to send it to overtime, because I believe that was the end of towards the end, and that was overtime. It was the first overtime, right? First, they didn't have to go for 2. He chose to go for 2. So Bama scored to make it 31-24. LSU scores, and they chose to go for 2. I thought that, I wish more teams would do that, because you're going to have to use a 2-point play to win anyway. Why not use your best one now? And because they're not expecting it. One of the best calls Brian Kelly's ever made. They made it. They got it. They won the game. Hasn't worked out as well the 2 years since. They lost to Alabama 2 years ago, 42-28. It's a close game early. Bama stomped them late. And then last year, Bama absolutely annihilated them, 42-13. I mean, and Jalen Milroe just went off running the ball in that game. I think the same thing happens this year. I don't think it's a competitive game. I think Alabama wins. So, I mean, yeah, you went to LSU and beat them by 29 last year. Yeah. Tuscaloosa, it won't be pretty. So I'll buy that one. Louisville upsets Miami. I buy that as a possibility. It's in Miami, I believe, so that makes it a little tougher. But Miami's not – look, Notre Dame fans have this view that Miami's this really tough place to play because of what happened to Notre Dame last time they went there.
Facts.
And I'm like, well, yeah, when you play the way Notre Dame played that game and you kind of have the mindset of, hey, we're not – we're not sure of ourselves and all that. Yeah, okay, it may not look like a great place to play, but I mean, Virginia Tech should have beat Miami last year. Duke took Miami, they played Miami real tough until like the last, 5 minutes of the game. And then I'm going to pull that up because we were talking about that last week. And that was one of the weirdest games, Trev, that I've ever seen when you just look at the final score.
That's crazy.
It was a very weird game. So it ended up being 53-31. In the fourth quarter, Duke kicks a field goal with 13 minutes left to make it 32-31. They were down by a point. And then Miami scored 3 touchdowns in the next 8 minutes to win that game, including a 2 long passes. And so, that was a very weird game, very strange game. And Duke was up. Miami jumped up 14-0. Duke tied it. Miami kicked the field goal. Duke was up at halftime, 21-17. Then Duke scores to make it 28-17, and Miami scored. It was a back-and-forth game until the very end. Much more competitive game. But we saw a pretty mediocre Georgia Tech team go into Miami 2 years ago and beat them. I mean, that Georgia Tech team finished the year 7-6. I mean, they were not that great. They lost to Boston College by 15 the next week. They got blown out by Clemson. I mean, that was not a great Georgia Tech team 2 years ago. Beat Miami at Miami. So we've seen Miami have some pretty mediocre teams, including losing to Louisville in Miami 2 years ago. So certainly possible. And then Miami repaid the favor and beat Louisville in Louisville last year. So they've played 2 very competitive games. So it's certainly possible. I would predict Miami to win it today. Right now, I'd probably pick Miami to win it. But I could see Louisville winning that. And then West Virginia upsets BYU. I'd buy that one as well. Possible.
Yeah, we see that the same.
I mean, I still remember watching Riley Leonard go into Miami a couple years ago and watching Duke absolutely annihilate Miami in Miami a couple years ago. Do you remember that game, Trey? I think it was 22. Where's it at? Let's see. Miami, Duke. Yes. 2022, Riley Leonard's first year as a starter. Duke beat Miami in Miami 45-21. They also lost at home that year 45-3. They lost at home that year 42-16. They lost to Middle Tennessee at home that year. Miami is not the place that Notre Dame fans think it is. It's been that way for you. It hasn't been that way for everybody else. It's been that way for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's had a hard time winning in Miami. Florida State hasn't. Duke hasn't. Middle Tennessee hasn't, and that was with Mario Cristobal. And that was his first year, but still, it's different. So
yeah, agreed. Notre Dame going into College Station in week 1 last year gave me all the confidence that I needed because Texas A&M is one of the few environments that is tough to play in, regardless of how good the team is. I know we have this discussion a lot on the show about there is obviously a correlation between how good the team is and how hard of the environment that it is. But Nick Saban had the greatest coach of my lifetime, had just as hard of a time going in and playing Texas A&M at Kyle Field when they had Johnny Manziel and they had that exciting offense in the same way that they had trouble when Texas A&M was 3-3. That is a hard environment to play in, man. And Notre Dame went in and won by double digits in week 1. Then gives me a lot more confidence. I draw more confidence from that than I do fear from what happened 8 years ago in the regular season in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Buy, sell, hold from Teach Like a Champion. Buy one, sell one, and hold one.
So these were longer. So
Okay.
I'm going to have to kind of cycle through. There's one per page. So we'll have to cycle through them and come back just to prepare you for that.
All right. Sounds good. The struggles with wide receiver recruiting are due to 1, lack of production on the field. Notre Dame is run first team and has not had prototypical quarterbacks and top tier wideout production. 2, changes and issues with the staff, issues with Chancey Stuckey, and then the transition of Mike Brown, and also changes in recruiting staff with Chad Bowden and others leaving for USC. Or 3, issues with the identification and evaluation of prospects and or not realizing early enough that potential commits aren't really interested enough in Notre Dame or are good fits.
I'm going to sell this one because this one has not primarily been a problem. I think they screwed up with Derek Meadows last year. I mean, Trev, you know how many times I kept telling you, this kid's not coming to Notre Dame. Like for months, I kept telling you, this kid's not going to pick Notre Dame. And even when there was like some optimism from Notre Dame, I reported it, but I was like, I just don't see it. It is what it is. Like I remember back when it was Washington and Notre Dame before he even blew up. And there's all these crystal balls from Notre Dame. And Ryan and I would be on the show talking about like, I don't know what you guys are hearing, but like our intel is telling us a different story. Like, I don't know where this is coming from. I don't think this kid wants to go to Notre Dame. And he kept waiting until he blew up. And then when he blew up, Notre Dame kind of fell on the back burner. So this hasn't really been an issue as much. It's more so some of these other things. So I think the lack of production I'm going to hold on because I think that's a little bit blown out of proportion. This year's production wasn't great, but Notre Dame has had plenty of years where they had production at receiver. I mean, 2018, they had a lot of production at receiver. 2019, they had a 1,000-yard receiver. 2020, they had good production at receiver in a shortened season. 2021, they had good production at receiver in a year where Jack Cohn had one of the, 5 or 6 best passing seasons in Notre Dame history. 2022 wasn't much production, but they had good production in 2023 as well when the offensive line cooperated. Last year they didn't. So I don't know that this is the one I'm going to hold. I think the bigger issue is this right here. I mean, in 4 years, you've had 3 different receiver coaches, and 2 of them weren't very good at their job. And now the one that is there now is having to clean up the mess, and he's getting kind of hammered for the fact that he's still overcoming the mess that was created before him. And I would say that development has been a bit of a problem, which, you know, I don't really see development on any of these as an issue. I think that ultimately is the biggest issue, because some of the big name guys they've had weren't there. I mean, and there's been some misevaluations. I and Notre Dame also both very much missed on Jordan Johnson. I very much missed on Jordan Johnson. There was a lot of off the field things that I didn't know about that led his work ethic, and I thought he was going to be a much better player than he was, and he wasn't. That's always going to happen, but I don't think that's the driving force. I mean, Rico Flores went to UCLA last year and played well. Jaden Greathouse has been a very good player. Jordan Faison's been a good player. You know, like I'm not worried about any of that. Evaluation's been fine for the most part. This has been the biggest thing, and there's been some of this, but it hasn't been a consistent problem. It's that I'm buying changes when it's issue with the staff. I'm holding the lack of production because I don't think it's completely not a factor at all. I think that it'd be naive and ignorant of me to say it's not an issue at all, but it's not as big of an issue as I think people make it out to be. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm definitely selling the third one. I'm having a tough time going back and forth between 1 and 2. Lack of continuity in the coaching staff for the wide receiver position, I'll buy. Lack of production is tough because you are right. Notre Dame has had good seasons, better than what some might think. I think it's just lack of production in comparison to some of these other schools that are recruiting receivers at a high level, not just specifically for Notre Dame, is where I have issues with like the lack of production on the field. Because for Notre Dame, it's not bad. Like it's not like they have just a laundry list of receivers that are ending. So
what you're saying is it hurts them when they're going against Ohio State. It hurts them when they're going against Texas, maybe LSU, but it doesn't hurt them overall.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if it's down to Notre Dame or Ohio State, they're going to lose a lot of those battles because of Ohio State's production and Notre Dame's lack of. Is that kind of the point you're making? That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair.
So, yeah. But yep, buy 2, hold 1, sell 3.
Yep.
So same order as you.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold from Teach Like a Champion. Buy 1, sell 1, hold 1. Biggest get for the 2026 recruiting class. However you want to view it in terms of the perception it brings to the class or potential impact on the field, either in 26 or moving forward, etc. Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, Kadon Finley.
So I'm going to look at it from a perception standpoint because I'm not holding or selling any of these kids as talents. These are all big-time football players. But you can't deny that Joey O'Brien doesn't have more buzz as a national recruit. He just does. Kari Adams is actually ranked higher by national services, by most national services, than is Joey O'Brien. I'm actually going to pull this up and make this kind of point this out. They're somewhat similar in certain ways, but I think Joey is ranked higher with rivals, but I believe that so with on 3, Kari is ranked 30th, Joey's ranked 99th. At 247, Joey's ranked 30th, Kari's 36th. At ESPN, Joey's ranked 102nd, Kari's ranked 68th. And then at Rivals, Joey's ranked 136th, and Kari's ranked 246th. And what does that tell us, Trevor? That Rivals DB recruiting needs some work because they also did not have Mark Zachary or Jadon Blair in the top 50 last year. So they need some work there. But Kari's a top 100, top 75 recruit from 3 of the 4 services. But when you look at the buzz about him and his perception nationally, he doesn't have as much juice as what Joey does, even though Kari's ranked higher. And Kadon Finley is another kid that is, he's a top 100 by Rivals. He's 111 by ESPN, 120 on 3, 216 on 247. So, I look at him and I say, hey, listen, I think he should be ranked higher. I think he's a top 100 recruit. But Kadon is also not a kid that does a lot of, media talks. He's not a kid that's like super flashy on Twitter. He's also a guy that I think part of the reason he went down on 247 is he went from consistently. So I'll give you this thing. He was ranked 74th and 73rd early on. And then as of April last year, he ranked 143rd. And he ranked for the entire time from April of last year to February of this year, he ranked somewhere between 142 and 150. And then you come into this spring, and all of a sudden, Notre Dame is the team to beat for him. And Kadon Finley on 247, who has a very big anti-Notre Dame bias, he drops to 214, and he's never been higher than 214 since then. That's what's going on there, in my opinion. But he's a quiet kid. He's not a look at me, it's all about me type of receiver. Seems to have some humility. Doesn't seem to really covet attention, which I have no problem with, by the way. Is irrelevant to me. This is all perception. So I don't think Kadon Finley gets the buzz that he does. So I'm buying Joey because he's a much more engaging kid. There's a perception about him. I'm buying him because of what that would mean perception-wise. I'm holding on Kadon because even though he doesn't have the same perception from that standpoint nationally, he might be the guy that is considered most important from the fan base because of the need at the position. So that's why I'm going to hold him. And if you wanted to buy him, Trev, I'd have no problem with that. I'm only selling Kari Adams because I don't know that Kari is bringing the same buzz, even though you could make a case that Kari has the highest ceiling of any of those three players. But they're all big-time top 100 football players, in my opinion. Like, very talented football players. So my comment about the buy sell hold has nothing to do with their football talent because they're all buys from a football talent standpoint. But in an attempt to honor the question or the submission where he said we can take it anywhere we went, you can't deny, Trev, that you can have three equal talents, but one guy gets more buzz than the other guy. One guy is more of a, you could argue a leader of a class. And that's not true of any of these guys because it's a different situation. But like one recruit could be considered a leader because he's out there and he's at camps and he's well known, where another guy is maybe a little bit more quiet and not reserved. And so one guy's going to have a bigger impact over the other guy because of that, from a recruiting standpoint, perception standpoint. So it's all about perception in this instance, because in reality, if they get all three of those players, those are all three top 100 football players. Those are big-time football players. So, but just perception-wise, I think the Joey O'Brien one brings more buzz. I've heard people say, I've seen people report, I should say, that Joey committing to Notre Dame would have a bit of a Pied Piper effect with the rest of the class. No one said that about Kari or Caden. Even though, to me, they're every bit as good of football players as he is. And you know, I've been on the Joey O'Brien hype train from day one. That's a phenomenal football player. Like, that's a big-time football player. But he's not – he's others don't have him ranked as high. So that's where I say perception-wise, that's where I'm at. But talent-wise, it's bye. I can't believe I just sounded like I'm a freaking NSYNC song. But, like, I'm buying all three of those, right? That's what I'll do. I'll do the dance and everything. I'm buying all of them, baby.
Hey, come on now. Hey.
Buying all of them. So let's do it.
Okay. Brian with the dance moves. Come on now. I love it. Yeah. There's an argument to be made in every different facet. You buy all three of these. I'm totally on board with buying Joey O'Brien for the perception it brings to the class, how much national buzz, class impact with his ratings nationally. I'm talking about for Kari Adams. For Notre Dame to land a kid like him, that's going to even more increase the overall outlook of what Notre Dame's 2026 recruiting class already is. And then with Caden Finley, you get that wide receiver, impactful guy. Love Bubba Frazier, love Dylan Faison, but you go out and you get a kid like Caden Finley, somebody who has NFL lineage. You kind of keep that reputation up going at Notre Dame as well. Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for all three. But we see that very, very much the same. Buy, sell, hold from Teach Like a Champion. Negative recruiting against Notre Dame. Too cold. Academics. Time since their last national championship, etc. Hurts the schools saying this to potential recruits more than it does Notre Dame, losing out on those potential commits.
It hurts those schools negatively recruiting Notre Dame with kids who are actually interested in Notre Dame. I've said this before, Trev. I've always believed this. This has always been my experience. I have never seen a kid, and I've been talking to recruits going back to 2010. So 15 years I've been covering this. I've literally never talked to a kid, and I've talked to a lot of kids who didn't pick Notre Dame. I've never seen a kid who loved Notre Dame, visits another school, and then doesn't love Notre Dame because of negative recruiting. I've never seen that. Now, when I say negative recruiting, I think of things like this. It's not negative recruiting to say we've produced 15 defensive linemen in the NFL draft the last 10 years. Notre Dame has produced one. That's not negative recruiting. That's a fact. You know, like I've heard schools say it's too cold there. The girls aren't attractive, which is such a childish, petty thing for a grown-up to say to a teenager, but that gets used a lot.
Also
shallow.
Gross.
And gross, exactly. Like
that's
what are
gross.
Are you checking out the college kids? Like,
yeah,
like what is wrong with you? Academics is lame. Like, how disrespectful is it for you to say, hey, man, you're going to struggle? That can work with kids, but that's only ever worked with kids who I felt were looking for a reason not to like Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, there's a kid recently that we'll never say who it is, but I think he's going to end up at Notre Dame. That he was looking at a school, they started negatively recruiting Notre Dame, and that was a big turnoff for him for that particular school, and they pretty much were out after that. And, you know, so I think if it's a kid that genuinely like has legitimate interest in Notre Dame, that stuff doesn't help Notre Dame, and it makes those schools look petty for Notre Dame type of kids. Like I can, there's like, you know, if some of the kids in Notre Dame's recruited, Jeremiah Love, Jadon Blair, like Ben Morrison, like really smart, savvy kid. And there's a lot, I can name a lot more. You start negatively recruiting something, they're going to like, well, why are you talking about Notre Dame? Why don't you talk about you? I want to know about you. It's like why I hate why I hate election season. Like you could go a whole election cycle and watch 87,000 commercials and ads from politicians and not have a clue what they stand for. It's just, well, this guy sucks. Vote for me because this guy sucks. Well, how about you give me a commercial where I know what you actually stand for? Where you're not telling me about the other guy. I already know about that guy. What do you stand for? Like there was like this, like everybody knows I lean right politically, but there was a governor race when I was in my 20s that I refused to vote for the Republican because his ads were moronic. And all he ever did was like bash the other guy. And I'm like, I don't have a clue what you stand for. How can I vote for you when I don't have a clue what you stand for? And all you do is make these petty attacks. And at the time, the guy that won was actually a pretty decent guy. He's turned into a bit of a nut job, but he was a pretty good governor, I felt at the time. So that's kind of why. Now, I didn't vote for him because we have a lot of political differences of opinion, and I didn't necessarily support those opinions, but I thought he was a decent man. Where this Republican guy was just an absolute clown who just kept telling me why I shouldn't vote for this guy because he's an evil this and he's bad. And I was like, I don't have a clue what you stand for. Like, I can't stand that stuff. And kids who genuinely like a school are not going to be prone to that. Kids who are kind of looking for a reason, maybe mom and dad likes Notre Dame more than they do, they're going to buy onto that stuff way more than the other way around. So I just don't think the negative recruiting works as well on kids who have genuine interest in Notre Dame. Because if you're going to be that swayed by something like it's too cold there, you were looking for a reason not to go there.
If you're confident,
go ahead.
And if you're confident enough in the school that you are recruiting for, then you shouldn't have to talk down other institutions.
Bingo. And that's something that Notre Dame very much believes. You know, another school that's been pretty good about that, talking to some sources around the Notre Dame program, you know who another school that's pretty good about that? Clemson.
Oh, I believe that.
Dabo's big into, we're selling Clemson. Now, that doesn't mean they don't pressure certain kids, and that doesn't mean they don't say, hey, we beat Notre Dame the last time. That's not negative recruiting. That's a fact. Saying, hey, we've won 2 titles in the last 10 years. Notre Dame hasn't won any. That's a fact. That's not negative recruiting. But Dabo's about, we're going to sell what we're about. If a kid doesn't want to come here because of what we're about, then I don't want that kid. And that's how Marcus Freeman is. So, yeah, the only one that I've ever bought, Trev, the only quote unquote negative recruiting that I've ever bought, and I don't think it's negative, I think it's more of a fact, that's had an impact is distance. It's distance. Hey man, why would you want to go that far away when you can come play here? But again, I still say that was already kind of there lingering in the kid's head. But I don't know that, I don't necessarily view that as negative recruiting though. That's a fact. Notre Dame's 1,500 miles away for this kid. We're 100. Like, that's not negative. That's a fact.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I draw a lot of analogies to sales. That's the background that I came from here. You can tell the difference between somebody who's good at their job versus somebody who's not if their entire sales pitch is around what the competition does poorly. Let what you do well sell itself. You know what I mean? Look, too cold. Look, if it's too cold for you, that means Ohio State is too cold for you, and Michigan, and Penn State, and Oregon, and Washington. And so, like, look, if you want to
had as many snow games in the last 5 years as Notre Dame has had, if not more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's look, you can make that argument. I think it's silly. You can. I mean, Notre Dame could do the same thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to be going through summer workouts on the turf down in Georgia when it's 110 degrees real feel outside and humid, I think the temperature one is silly, but it is a thing. It's prevalent, you know, but all in all, if whatever school is doing the recruiting is confident in the product that they're putting out, you don't have to negatively recruit other schools. That's the sign that shows, at least when I look at it, that you are losing on the recruiting trail when you have to resort to, well, I mean, Notre Dame is just not good. I mean, when's the last time they won a national championship? It's like, well, I could be an integral part in them winning their next one. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And that's why Notre Dame gets the kids that they get.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Buy, sell, hold from ND Fan for Life College. Best running back for your personal team. Barry Sanders, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey.
This is a hard one. So the easy sell for me is Derrick Henry, because he said my personal team, and the offense that I would run would not be geared towards doing what Derrick Henry needs to be his best. But would I take Derrick Henry on my team? Yeah. And I would figure it out. I'd figure out a way to make it. If he was the only option I had of these three, I'd take him in a heartbeat and I'd figure it out. We'd adjust our offense and be Derrick. We're going to go recruit a couple tight ends. You know what I mean? Like we might even go get a fullback and you know what I mean? Like, but if I could get any of the three, he would not be my pick because he doesn't fit the system that I would prefer. The guy that fits the system that I prefer more than any is Christian McCaffrey, because my personal system, I love movement. I love running backs can go outside. The guy, there's a whole lot of things I can do with him. Whereas I could have, in a modern offense, I could use Christian McCaffrey and Thurman Thomas together in ways I can't use Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders together. And the reason I say Thurman Thomas, for those of you not old enough to know this, Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders played on the same team at Oklahoma State. Talk about greatest running back tandems of all time. Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders in the same backfield at Oklahoma State. But Barry was not like Barry could be dynamic in like the screen game, but you weren't lining up Barry in the slot and having him run slot fades and things like Christian McCaffrey couldn't do all that. So for my personal system, it's Christian McCaffrey. If we're talking about who's the best running back, it's buying I'm buying Barry Sanders any day of the week. He was the greatest college running back. I mean, the greatest season a running back has ever had as a running back. But you know who broke his record for yards in a season total? It was Christian McCaffrey. Now, the asterisk on that is they don't count Barry's bowl game performance, which I keep trying to tell people this. Barry Sanders played in 11 games, and they did not count his Wyoming bowl game performance. And I believe he had over 200 yards when they count his statistics. It is the nuttiest performance I've ever seen. And he did it. And the reason it kind of sticks in my head, Trevor, is he did it because it was the year that Notre Dame won the title. But this is what Barry Sanders did in every game that year. So in the opening game against Miami of Ohio, he had 18 carries for 178 yards. He scored 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, and 1 kick return for a touchdown. He had 178 yards, 157 yards against Texas A&M on 20 carries, 3 touchdowns, 2 rush, and a punt return for a touchdown. Against Tulsa, he had 304 yards on 33 carries, 5 touchdowns. Against Colorado, he had 174 yards on 24 carries, 4 touchdowns. Against Nebraska, he had keep in mind, this is late 80s Nebraska, so this is really good Nebraska. He had 189 yards and 4 touchdowns. Against, we had Nebraska next. Okay, then against Missouri, he had 154 yards and 2 touchdowns and a 28-point win. Against Kansas State, he had 320 yards on 37 carries and 3 touchdowns. Against Oklahoma, again, late 80s Oklahoma was really good. He had 215 yards on 39 carries and 2 touchdowns. Against Kansas, he had 312 yards and 5 touchdowns on 37 carries. Against Iowa State, he had 293 yards and 4 touchdowns on 32 carries. Against Texas Tech in Tokyo, he had 332 carries and 4 touchdowns, or 332 yards and 4 touchdowns on 44 carries. And so that's where you get his season total of 2,628 yards. But Barry Sanders also rushed for 222 yards on 29 touches and 5 touchdowns in a bowl game. So if you include his bowl game performance, that he has 2,850 yards rushing, and he has 42 rushing touchdowns that season. And that I believe is 12 games. Let me look at that. That's 12 games, Trevor. 2,850 yards is what he would have had in 12. His 26-28, that was the record that got broke. He did in 11 games. Didn't count bowl games back then, which is dumb. They should retroactively go back and add stats for all bowl games.
Yeah.
That's what they should do. But that's nuts.
Did you say they played Texas A&M in Tokyo?
They played Texas Tech in Tokyo. They used to do that back in the 80s. And Notre Dame one year played Miami in Tokyo in the 80s.
Huh.
Yeah. Notre Dame played like a spring game or something like that, like in Tokyo. I don't know why they were trying to sell college football in Tokyo, but yeah, they played a lot of games, several games in Tokyo back then. Yeah.
All right. That's interesting.
And it was 2 weeks after they played Iowa State, but he rushed for 332 yards and 44 carries. And he had to do that because they gave up 20, they gave up 15, they gave up 35, 21, they gave up 63 points, 21 points, 27 points, 31 points, 24 points, 28 points, 42 points, 14 points in a bowl game. That defense was not stopping people.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. So Barry had to do all that, but that was the most unbelievable season. Like you think about how good Derrick Henry was, right? And the year he won the Heisman Trophy, and Derrick Henry was a phenomenal player. I mean, Derrick Henry that year rushed for 2,219 yards and 28 touchdowns in 15 games. Barry Sanders ran for 2,850 yards in 12 games and had 42 touchdowns in 12 games, and he played in the Big 8. It's not like he played in the Mountain West or he played in the Big 8, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado. Like, dude was awesome. You know who his quarterback was? You know who his quarterback was, right?
Barry Sanders?
Yeah.
So what would that have been, like 88?
1988.
Oklahoma State?
Yep. Mike Gundy.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They had a receiver on that team, too, that was really good. Hartley Dykes. He was really good, too. But, yeah, Mike Gundy was the starting quarterback on that team.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's who I'd go with, Trev. What say you?
Yeah, for my team, I would have it the same order. Christian McCaffrey, Barry Sanders, and then Derrick Henry. Look, can you go wrong with any of the choices? No. What Barry Sanders did was super impressive, but it's also in the same vein of, like, sometimes when you bring up, why wouldn't you have Joe Montana on your team? It's like, well, because I didn't watch him play.
Right.
I don't know what,
Sorry that I didn't pick Leon Hart for my end position.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm sorry I didn't pick the 4 horsemen to round out my backfield for Notre Dame on my dream team, but I just never watched them play. So some of that goes into how I feel about Barry Sanders. I mean, look, I wasn't even I won't go there. I just didn't watch him play in the NFL either. But I remember watching videos of him, and he was insane. But Christian McCaffrey is who I would build my offense around.
I will say this, though, Trev. If you're a coach and you can't build your offense around any of these guys, you are in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you are running an offense, if you have access to all 3, then pick the guy that best fits your offense.
Absolutely.
Because as you said, it's a win-win-win situation. So if I'm going to win the most, I'm going to pick the guy that is the best suited of what I want. But Barry Sanders is still, in my opinion, the greatest running back that's ever played the game. And now I know most of that is built around one season, but that one season was that good.
Yeah.
And I also would say if he wasn't playing behind Thurman Thomas, could you imagine what his numbers would have been? I mean, like, it would have been unreal. So, like, in his last season, not counting the bowl game, he had 2,628 rushing yards, 106 receiving yards. He returned 21 kicks for 421 yards and a touchdown. And he returned 10 punts for 94 yards and a touchdown. The year before, when he was sort of kind of your number 2 behind Thurman Thomas, and Thurman Thomas that year rushed for 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns, Barry still had 603 yards and 9 touchdowns. But that year, Trev, he also averaged 31.6 yards on 14 kick returns, had 2 touchdowns. He averaged 16.3 yards on 15 punt returns and had 2 touchdowns. So he was a freak. He was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
That's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He was big time.
Buy, sell, hold from JG Ytown. The wide receiver room has a total of 3,500 yards for the season. The Notre Dame starting quarterback will rush for 500 yards for the season, and the defense will hold opponents to 15 points per game.
Boy, that's a heck of a year. I'm going to sell that because as good as I think the receivers are going to be, I don't know that they're going to get to 3,500 yards. I mean, if Notre Dame plays 16 games and the receivers average 3,500 yards, that's 218.8 yards per game just from the receivers. When you have the tight ends that Notre Dame has and you have the running backs Notre Dame has, it's going to be hard for them to get that kind of number. I'll say this. If Notre Dame's receivers get to 3,500 yards in 16 games, much less maybe 15, then this team is going to be unbelievably hard to beat. Yeah.
I'm
selling go ahead.
If that's the numbers that they amass, like, they're not going to lose a game. I will go ahead and say that right now. If just the wide receivers, I mean, like I've said before, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but there's a finite amount of yards to go around. Right. And
especially when you have the best backfield in college football.
Exactly. And a tight end on the verge of a breakout. And that means if all things considered, that means that whoever's the starting quarterback at Notre Dame is passing for, I would say, at least 4,400 yards in their first season as a starter. If this is just what the wide receiver room does, so I would love nothing more than this to be true. But again, there's just a finite amount of yards that you can gain in a season.
I'm going to sell all three of those.
Yeah.
If Kenny Minchie starts at quarterback, then I'll buy that. But because I anticipate CJ being the starter, I'm selling that. But if Kenny starts, he'll get there. Look, Trev, there's a world, and we'll talk about this when we get closer to the season, but there's a world in which Notre Dame gives up more points and yards than it did a year ago and is a better defense. Simply because I think the schedule they play in relation to the offenses is much better. And you've written about this a couple times in Irish Breakdown. The quarterback play alone is significantly better this year than what it was last year. Just that position. You also play two of the 10 best offensive lines in college football this year in A&M and Miami. You play, two backfields at least that you and I would rank in the top 10 nationally in Miami and Texas A&M. You can make a case for some others. I think that, Pitt has a chance to have a pretty good backfield this year. BC has a quality backfield. USC has a quality, but it's not as good as it was last year, but it's still a quality backfield. They play some good back, and there's others. Navy. There's some good receiving cores they play. That's probably the weakest position group that they play, but I think USC's O-line is going to be better than it was a year ago for the most part.
Agreed.
So I just think overall the defense is going to have tougher competition in the regular season than they did last year. So I could see the numbers being worse, but the actual performance relative to who they're playing significantly better.
In the chat,
or just better, I should say.
In the chat, JG Whitehound did say he wants us to buy one, sell one, and hold one.
Got it. If I have to buy one of those three, I would buy the rush yards for the quarterback, because in a 16-game season, even CJ Carr can get there. That's 31 yards a game. That's scrambles and some things. So, sure. I would hold the 15 points a game and sell the receiver yards.
Yep, I would do the same. Then buy, sell, hold. JG, you can correct me in the chat. I'm assuming you want us to do the same here, but Notre Dame, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will land 3 5-stars in this year's recruiting class. A team other than Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State will win the Big Ten, and at least 5 FCS schools will upset a Power 4 team.
I am definitely buying the I'm definitely selling someone other than Ohio State, Oregon, or Penn State will win the Big Ten. I can't think of I think Washington is going to be better. I don't see them winning the Big Ten. I think Michigan's not going to win the Big Ten. Nebraska, maybe if you're really buying into Nebraska this year, maybe. Indiana, no. I just think those are 3 are clearly the best teams. I'm going to hold on the 5 FCS schools because I haven't looked at enough schedules. I just haven't. And I might, if I had a better sense of what the schedule is, I might sell that one and hold the other one, but I have to hold that because I don't know it. And then Notre Dame will have 3 5-stars in this year's recruiting cycle. I'll buy that as far as my ranking system, perhaps. But yeah, none of those are ones that I feel great about. Honestly. Actually, you know what? I'm actually going to flip that. I think there's a better chance that somebody other than Ohio State, Oregon, or Penn State wins the Big Ten than Notre Dame gets 3 5-stars, just because of the way the ranking system works. And that includes my ranking system, because there are guys who won't be 5-stars on my system that would be 5-stars on other systems, because I take the current and the upside and separate them. Whereas another ranking system is going to incorporate the upside into their ranking, because they project to the NFL. So it's a lot about the upside. So, and I just think that you'll end up seeing some Notre Dame players getting dropped by some of the services because they committed to Notre Dame. And so that's why I'm going to say sell that one. So I'm actually going to buy the Big Ten one, even though I don't have faith in any of those things coming true.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you are with the FCS schools. I just don't. I know that Notre Dame is one of 10 schools in the country that don't play an FCS team this upcoming season, but I don't know who all does play them.
It's hard to speak on something that I'm just not familiar with.
Exactly. I'm with you. It is so hard to imagine a world where one of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State don't win the Big Ten. I genuinely don't know who it would be. Truly. I mean, if it were up to me.
Trev, North Dakota State does not play a Power 4 team this year.
Okay.
And South Dakota State does not play a Power 4 team this year.
Okay. Well, then.
So, the two most dominant FCS programs don't play a Power 4 team, and the other program that was on their level, James Madison, has now been a Division I team for going into 4 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Did an FCS school beat a Power 4 team? I mean, that's Power 4. Like, that's not even
group
of 5.
Yeah, I believe so.
So I'm thinking North Dakota State played Colorado last year and they lost.
South Dakota State lost a close game. I believe there was an FCS. I mean, because again, it's some of the bad teams, but I can go look at that, Trev, and look that up. But yeah,
because I mean, even Purdue beat Indiana State.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Indiana State's an FCS powerhouse, but
I'm pretty sure there was one early. I have to go find it, but yeah,
But even in the same vein, even if it is 1, going from 1 to 5,
right,
is especially when North Dakota or South Dakota State don't play a Power 5. I mean, that's
yeah. I'm trying to even find. I mean, because there are some Power 4 teams that aren't very good. I mean but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lose an FC, and a lot of them will play an FCS team that's just not good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm looking through here, and I don't know that I've seen one. That doesn't happen a lot. At least 5. The more I think about the question, I'm going to sell that one. Yeah. Hold the 5 stars and buy the Big Ten one.
I'm going to sell the FCS one. I'm going to buy the 3-star one and hold the Big Ten one. But I don't say
this is what makes this a great submission, though.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like 3 positives and they're all great options and they're all easy and I'll take any of them. But these are 3 that I don't know, feel good about any of them. So that's what makes it a really good submission.
That was a very good
well
submission.
Done, JG Whitetown.
Buy, sell, hold from Lucky Duck 512. After having arguably the best DB class last year, if Notre Dame finishes out the group with Joey O'Brien and Kari Adams, it will be as good or a better class than last year.
Ooh, sell. Because last year's class had 6 dudes in it. This class had 4 dudes in it. And this year's class, I could see 2 of the 4 finishing as top 50 players on my board. I could see Kari and Joey being top 50 players on my board. But Dallas and Jadon were also both top 50 players on my board last year. And then this year you have Aiden Pounce, who's a top 100 player. And then last year you had Mark Zachary, who was a top 100 player. And then this year you would then have Justin Smith, who's a top 150 player. But I had Cree Thomas as a top 150 player last year as well. Then you add in Brandon Logan, who's a top 250 player, and then Ethan Long, who was your number 6 guy last year. So just the numbers alone. Now, if you get Nick Reddish, now we have more of an ability to have a conversation about which one is better. But last year's class was just 2 guys bigger based on what you just said. Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah. So sell. I would say it's as good pound for pound, so to speak, but it's hard to compare a 6-man class to a 4-man class.
Sure.
Especially when last year's 4-man class had a couple top 50 dudes in it too. And that's what gets you excited, dreaming of a secondary that one day, think about this starting lineup potentially someday. Joey O'Brien and Jadon Blair next to each other at safety.
Okay.
with Kari Adams and Mark Zacher on opposite sides of corner and Dallas Golden locking down the nickel, the slot. And a rotation that has, Cree Thomas and Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith and Brandon Logan and Ethan Long and maybe Nick Reddish. Just the two classes, not even talking about Bronte from the year before, Carson Hobbs from the year before, just Leonard Moore from the year before. We're just talking about just the last two classes. Think about that starting lineup someday. That's unbelievable. I called Sean the other day. I called Sean Davis. No, I called somebody else. And I said, I'm going to make two definitive statements to you. And he goes, what's that? I said, number one, I have no idea what Mike Mickens is getting paid. That's a statement of fact. And he starts laughing because he knows where I'm going. So number two statement of fact, it's not enough. He's underpaid. Well, how much is he making? I don't know, but it's still he's underpaid. It's unbelievable if he finishes with these two kids. It's absolutely unbelievable what he's doing in Notre Dame right now.
Yeah, if he finishes with these two kids, it's a scenario where you hand him a blank check. Man, it's like, all right, man, what are you thinking? And so, yeah, man, that potential future lineup. Oh,
that's just 2 years. That doesn't include the class that had Leonard Moore in it, that had Carson Hobbs in it, that had Bronte Johnson in it. Like, it doesn't even include them. It's just these two. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. If these three players were in the 2027 class, buy one, sell one, hold one as prospects for Mike Denbrock's offense. Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen, CJ Carr.
Why are you trying to do that to me? Okay, if we're just talking about what they were as prospects, it's buy Jimmy Clausen, hold CJ Carr, sell Brady Quinn. Just as where they were what they were as high school prospects, and you put them into this year's 27 class, it's Jimmy Clausen, CJ Carr, and Brady Quinn. Buy Jimmy, hold CJ, sell Brady. Now, here's a funny story for you, or here's an interesting story for you. Brady was a good recruit, but he wasn't like an elite recruit coming out of high school. I'm going to actually pull up his he was 2002 class, 2003 class. So Rivals ranked him as a 4-star, but not a top 100 recruit. Because back then, Rivals only had the top 100. He had offers from Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan liked him, but he was not a top 100 player. He was the number 8 player in the state of Ohio, the number 10 quarterback in the country that year by Rivals. And Rivals was the dominant recruiting service back then. Like, they had Scout, but it was Rivals. Jimmy was the number 1 quarterback in the country, and CJ with Rivals was also ranked higher. So if you just look at like the Rivals rankings, then that's what it is too. But here's an interesting story. So back then when Brady was coming out, I was coaching football. I had just gotten into my coaching career. This is not a story about my coaching career because I know some people hate that. I don't care. But he was so one of the things. So like what I would do back then is because back in the day, football camps a lot of times would be like but a lot of them were like multi-day camp. Maryland, I'd work it for a few days. That's how I, met Bill O'Brien and James Franklin, and they were on the same staff or under Ralph Friedgen. I'd work it for a few days. What was nice about Bowling Green is Bowling Green back then would do a bunch of one-day camps and like team camps. So I would go work their camps because for me it was there's a lot of kids who think they're Division I players but are more 1AA D3 players that were really good. That's who we were looking for. That's how we would find some kids. They're not going to come to a camp where I'm coaching. And so for those 2 years that I was at Wittenberg and then at Muhlenberg, I would actually go cover Bowling Green's camp when Urban Meyer and his staff were there. And I got to know Dan Mullen a little bit while he was there and hung out with him. But he actually, I think it was the second year I worked their camp. I remember him coming back and it's just some of us coaches standing around talking. And he goes, yeah, man, I just watched one of the best high school players I've ever seen at Michigan's camp because he went and worked a Michigan camp. And they're like, who are you talking about? He's like, there's this kid from Ohio named Brady Quinn, and I just watched him throw at Michigan, and he's got one of the best arms I've ever seen. Like, so Dan Mullen thought that about Brady Quinn, but the recruiting services didn't think that about Brady Quinn. And then, of course, Brady went on to be an elite college football player. But I thought that was a very interesting statement. Very interesting statement. But that's how I first heard about Brady Quinn, because I didn't super follow recruiting. Like, I would kind of find out who they signed, but I didn't follow like the day to day of who Notre Dame was going to get. And this is, I think, maybe 01 or 02. I think it was 02, but it might have been 01. But I thought that was a fascinating statement that Dan Mullen made about Brady Quinn. So Dan Mullen's always had a pretty good eye for quarterbacks. So
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, but that's just not who Brady was. I never saw Brady, as a high school kid, but Jimmy was still one of the best high school quarterbacks I've ever seen. He's probably the second best high school quarterback I've seen, behind Ronald Curry. So yeah, that's mine.
I know it hurt you to sell Brady Quinn.
It hurt bad.
I know.
It hurt.
I have the same order, though. I have the same.
Because the question was as prospects. It's not. Yeah. I mean, Brady was a better quarterback in college than Jimmy. He was, but it's as prospects.
Yep. By so whole, Jack Larson will be second in receptions and touchdowns amongst tight ends this season.
Buy that. I like that one, Lucky Duck. I'm going to buy that, Trev, because especially if CJ's the starting quarterback, because as we knew in high school, going all the way back to high school, CJ loves throwing to Jack Larson. Do you know why? Because Jack Larson's one of those, he may not be open, but he's open guys. Like, Jack may look covered, but if you throw it up there, Jack Larson's got really long arms, but Jack Larson has some of the best hands you'll see at the top from a tight end. Like, he's got really good hands. And you guys all saw it when he made that catch on the Don Schuler in the Blue Gold game. But part of the reason CJ made that throw is he's like, I'm throwing to Jack. Jack's my dude. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they've got a connection. So I'm going to buy that. I like that.
Yeah, I love it. And the lad of the room, it's not like it's some outlandish, oh, that'd be cool if it happened type of thing. No, I'll buy that too.
Real quick, Tommy Guns just put up a Bice-a-hold. Brian just died a little bit on the inside because of the Brady Quinn one. And that's a buy, Tommy. That's a buy. That's a buy. I just hope Angela's not watching the show, because if she heard me sell Brady Quinn, yeah. So like, you come visit my house, Trev, I'm gonna walk you into the guest room and be like, this is where I sleep. This is my room. This is where Angela sleeps, and the nice big old bed with the dogs. But this is where I sleep. Why is that, Brian? Yeah, she heard me say that I'm selling Brady Quinn in a Bice-a-hold, and she has not forgiven me yet. So. Because we also named our first dog Brady, and so there's a little even more sentiment for her in that one. So yeah, I just a little bit inside.
At the Blue Gold game, I sat next to a family with twin boys. Their sons' names were Brady and Quinn.
Are you serious?
Swear.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
Now, if they're an Irish family, it may be a coincidence. I mean, you know True. What I mean? Like, it could be a coincidence. So
yeah,
John Christophic said, Brian's sleeping with the dogs tonight. No, bro, our dogs sleep in our bed. So if I'm not sleeping with the dogs tonight, because Reed didn't say he sleep with us. So I am not. Yeah. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. There's no doubt about it. So it hurt my heart a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I saw a tear come down.
A little bit. No, I just yawned. I got the yawn tears. That's all it is.
By so hold, Eli Raridan leads the team in receptions in at least 4 games this season.
I'm going to sell that. Because I think Eli is going to be more of a bigger. I could be wrong on this, but I think he's going to be more of a bigger play tight end, not so much a volume catches tight end. Like, I could see some 4 for 80 games, some 4 for 70 games, as opposed to 8 for 90 games from him. But I do think he'll lead I think 4 is a good number where I got to really think about it, Lucky Duck, but I'm leaning towards selling this one. I think it'll probably be closer to, like 3. I could see it being 4, but I'm going to sell that one. But I think you picked a good number.
Yep.
If you think about 16 games, that's 25% of the games that one guy leads it. And I just think that would more likely be, I think Jaden Greathouse will lead the team. Jaden Greathouse or Malachi Fields will dominate catches per game for a chunk of the year. One of those two. And then there's going to be some games where Jordan Faison does it, or maybe a Will Pauling does it. I could even see a game where like Jeremiah Love catches 7 balls, like 4 check downs and 2 screens and a design down the field pass, something like that. I could see. So I'm going to go 3, but I think Eli is going to be more of a big play guy on the screens and the seams and the stuff like that than he will be a volume pass catcher. Just my 2 cents.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold from Poe Welch 84. After the 2026 recruiting class signs, the rest of college football's fear of Notre Dame will be on high alert if it isn't already.
Buy. That is, I mean, it's already there. That's why you're hearing some of the really negative recruiting going on with Notre Dame right now with certain teams. That is very much a buy. Very much a buy.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Buy, sell, hold from Stevie ND. The Georgia Tech game was the prettiest uniform game of Notre Dame's 2024 season.
If they'd have played that game outdoors, I would buy it. But I just felt like the indoor, the lighting of that stadium is not great. And I just don't feel like it popped as much as it could have. And I felt like there was just too much. There was too much of the same color on both sides. I've said this, Trev. The gold with the blue jerseys and the white pants would have looked way better against a team that wasn't wearing the same exact colors.
Sure.
Gold, navy, blue, and white. So yeah, but I'm someone who loves the white pants, and somebody said in the chat said that they're too plain. I mean, I like plain white pants with a logo on them. I mean, stripes can look good. They can be done very well. Like if you look at like the Broncos uniforms of the 80s, which I still think are some of the prettiest uniforms ever, the bright orange with like the really baby blue, the Columbia blue, those are great uniforms. That orange and blue stripe down the pant leg was just added something to it. But I've also seen teams that have white pants, and I'm like, that looks sweet. It just depends on what you do and if you know, and what your uppers look like.
Yeah. Well, and it would have went against, I mean, their gold pants don't have stripes on them. The Kelly green pants that they have don't have stripes on them. The navy blue pants that they wore for the Shamrock series didn't have a stripe on them. I think it would have looked off, but I'm going to sell this, man. I am a sucker for the green jerseys and the white pants. I think that looks so sharp.
So the Louisville game?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And it was a lot of white on the field because Louisville was, I think, in their whiteout uniforms
All white,
as well.
Yeah.
But just Notre Dame specifically, man, the green with the white looks so good.
I think if I'm thinking through the prettiest uniform combination, I mean, obviously my favorite Notre Dame uniform is still the blue and gold.
Oh, sure.
I'd have to say, man, that's a tough one. The title game was close because you look at Notre Dame and Ohio State, two iconic uniforms playing each other. I don't love that. Like if Notre Dame, Georgia was in there, I like Georgia's unis, but I still like Notre Dame's homes. This is a very unpopular opinion, but I thought Notre Dame's all whites against Clemson were very ugly because there's too much white. But when you put them on the field with USC, that looked sweet with USC's color. I just think the white on white does not look good when the other team is wearing white. Like that's why I didn't like about there was too much white on the field with Clemson and Notre Dame. All white for Notre Dame and then white pants for Clemson. If Clemson would have been wearing their all orange, I probably would have had a different view of that. But I thought it looked really sweet with USC. But I'm going to have to go with the championship game. Probably had the prettiest uniforms. Those are two. And I guess maybe that's because I grew up in Ohio, so I still have a little bit of that, that affinities for the Buckeye uniform to a degree. But I'm trying to think of some other games, man, that there's some pretty uniforms on. Army game was not bad. I did not think I was going to like those uniforms.
Same.
Like when I saw them released, I was like, that's hideous. Like, what are they trying to be, Batman or something like that? Like, but when you actually see them on TV with Army, it's like, okay, those look pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I think the Virginia, you know what? The Notre Dame Virginia game was pretty sweet. Those looked pretty good when they had the orange pants, and then I thought those looked pretty good. But I'll go title game, so I'll sell that. Yeah, it's funny sometimes. Like the 2015 Shamrock uniform, when I saw it in person when they released it, we were in the press conference where they released. I'm like, dude, that is the sweetest Shamrock uniform. Like that all green with the gold. I'm like, that is freaking money. But then it looked terrible on TV.
Yeah.
And then when I saw the release of the Army one, I was like, dude, that looks hideous. But then when you see it on TV, you're like, okay, that plays real well on TV. So those were pretty sweet.
Buy, sell, hold from TNAC. Buy, sell, or hold. I hate even putting this out into the universe, so apologies in advance. Oh boy. But I'm curious how you all think Coach Freeman would handle this situation. Scenario. CJ Carr is named the starter, but gets off to a brutal first half in the opener. Let's say he goes 2 for 11, takes 3 sacks, and throws 2 interceptions, and just looks shaky. Okay. At that point, Freeman pulls him at halftime in favor of Minchie. I'm only asking because I remember Brian Kelly having a pretty quick hook with quarterbacks in similar situations. Personally, I'd probably leave Carr in there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So am I buy, selling, or holding that if CJ started that way that he'd get pulled at halftime? I would sell it. I would sell that they would do that at halftime. It would just depend on, here's what it would depend on, Trevor. When we get back to the locker room, if I'm Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock, I'm looking CJ in the face and I'm talking to him normally and I'm saying, how's he responding? If he looks like he shook, like mentally shook, then I might have to make a change.
Yeah.
If he's frustrated because of how he's played, then we make adjustments. We go out there and we go play ball.
Mm-hmm.
That may seem kind of silly, but like that's a real thing in coaching. Like you got to look in the guy's eyes and be like, this guy wants to go back out there and battle because he's pissed at how he played. He knows he can play better. He knows what he did wrong. He's just got to get in the rhythm and he'll be fine. And then there's times you look in a guy's head and start talking to him and his head goes down. He puts his head down. His confidence is shook. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know what mistakes he made. He's identifying things on the field that's not what they were doing. That's when you say this kid's he's overwhelmed and we got to maybe consider making a move. So I'm selling that. I think that's the only scenario that they would pull him at halftime unless there's an injury. And the other thing could be is like, let's say he takes a sack in the first series and his shoulder's a little gimpy and that's why he's making mistakes. And then at halftime, you realize he's got a lot of pain there. Now you're taking him out to protect him a little bit. That's the other scenario where I could say you buy it, but then the next week he's your starting quarterback as long as he's healthy. Like that, like a healthy Kenny Minchie gives you a better chance to win than a 65% healthy CJ Carr. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah.
But overall, I would say I would sell that. I would sell that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I want to sell this whole scenario because it's gross. I understand why you're asking the question.
And he knew it too. Like it's like the whole he gave a preface and then at the end he's like, I'm only asking because but he is true because it's not a given that Brian Kelly wouldn't have yanked him. We'd be having a very different conversation about this if we were talking about Brian Kelly still being the head coach.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from the ghost of George O'Leary. The 2011 game against Michigan is the most memory hold game in the last 25 years for Notre Dame fans.
I can't speak for anybody but myself. That is a game that I will never memory hold because I loved being there for that game. Yes, it sucked the ending, but being in that stadium for that game was still one of my favorite experiences of doing this job. The ending sucked. But being in that stadium and where they've played all those legendary games back and forth, you know, the jerseys that they were wearing and all that both teams were wearing, I'll never memory hold that one, especially when if I can only memory hold one, that's not even the most memory hold game of Notre Dame versus Michigan since 2010. I'd rather memory hold 2013 more than that one, and I'm definitely memory holding 2019. But I'd still probably go Miami 2017. It's still the game that I try to just not even think about. Like, that one was Someday I'm going to look back and say it's going to be the Northern Illinois game. But right now, Miami 2017 was just the one that I just try to not think about as much. And I'm hoping that if they win this year at Miami, then I can definitely completely, fully memory hold it.
Yeah, mine is the two-way tie for first place between Miami 2017 and Michigan 2019. Those are the I've said it before, the only 2 games that I ever turned off.
What'd you say? 17 and 9. That's the 2, Michigan 19, Miami 17. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Those are the only 2 games to this date that I've ever turned off. And I would like to just completely, IGK, I feel you, buddy. I'm in the same boat, but those 2 games were, I mean, I didn't even know that Cole Kmet caught that touchdown against Michigan in 2019. Like I saw it on Twitter.
You never saw it?
No, I didn't see it live. I saw it on Twitter, and it was like some like Notre Dame fan accounts like battling back ? And I was like, shut up,
dude. It's 42-14. Shut.
That's what that's what I'm saying. I was like, unless college football in the last 15 minutes added a 3/4 extension onto what the game was, no, those games were horrid, absolutely diabolical. And that's the last I want to think about it. That's how memory hold it is.
Let's move on from that one, my friend. I am all about it. Let's do it.
Buy, sell, hold. Snow games in November this coming year.
Well, he doesn't say that it has to be in South Bend. And when you look at Notre Dame's schedule in November, they play 2 home games. So there's certainly possible to have snow in the 2 home games, Navy on the 8th and Syracuse on the 22nd. But they also have November games at Boston College and at Pitt. So there's 4 games in a row that there's an opportunity for snow. So I'll buy that there will be at least 1 snow game this fall.
Yeah, I'll buy it too, and I'll take it a step further. Hopefully they do something petty and just wear their all-white uniforms.
That may be cool for you, the defense, but that may not be cool for the Notre Dame quarterback. So it's like, can we wear fluorescent green uniforms, please, in this game so I can see where the receivers are?
Notre Dame playing in the first ever multicolored jersey game.
Yes.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. Blake Hebert will play against Purdue this year.
Buy.
Yeah.
Like I was starting to talk myself into Purdue might be really improved. And then I just, the more just because you like, new player. And they were so bad last year, but it's like, they're going to be better than they were last year. But after we did the show yesterday, they're still going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those conversations where they will be improved, but the bar is set extremely low.
Yes.
So. Buy, sell, hold. If being recruited by these coaches, both as yourself and then a loved one whom you'd had sway over, who did not play quarterback, buy one, hold one, sell one. Lincoln Riley, PJ Fleck, Scott Frost.
I would buy PJ Fleck. I would hold Lincoln Riley, and I would sell the heck out of Scott Frost. Now, part of it is you said not play quarterback, but if my kid's a wide receiver, then my answer changes. So it depends, what does my kid play? Is he a defensive player? Then it changes. But let's just say my kid's I don't know, say he's a wide receiver. I dislike PJ Fleck personally, but from everything I've been told, he cares about his kids, players, and they play hard. And so probably buy him and hold Lincoln Riley. If my kid's an offensive player, I might have to flip that, but I would never allow my child to play for Scott Frost.
Yep. The consensus, I think I'd sell Scott Frost in either scenario. For me, since I was a quarterback, I would love to play for Lincoln Riley and just his lineage of what he did. And then, I buy Lincoln Riley, hold PJ Fleck, sell Scott Frost.
Yeah, but if they did not play QB, my Lincoln Riley opinion changes. Did you see the pronunciation for this one on the board, Trev? He put
Lukulik?
Yeah, I think that was it. On Lukulik.
Okay. Yeah. All right, buy, sell, hold from on Lukulik. There is a clear pathway for Notre Dame to become secondary U. Notre Dame will have achieved moniker in the next 5 seasons.
The longer Mike Mickens stays, the better chance there is, but absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you've had you're missing some ingredients, right? They're going to need some more of these guys being drafted to have success in the NFL, but you're starting to see that. Kyle Hamilton, Jordan Love, Jordan Love.
You.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, Julian Love.
There we go.
Excuse me. let's see what Benjamin Morrison does. Let's see what Xavier Watts does, and some guys like that. Cam Hart started last year a lot for the Chargers. He's got to learn. He's got not learn, but he's got to be able to stay healthy. But he started when he was healthy. He was a starter for the Chargers last year. Mm-hmm. You got Leonard Moore coming down the pike. You've got Christian Gray, Don Shula. You're gonna start pumping out a lot more guys in the NFL. Some of them have to have success, but like in college, you've had a unanimous All-American. You've had two freshman All-Americans, and you're getting way deeper and way more talented and way longer. Yeah, I could see. I mean, we thought they had a top 5 secondary last year. We anticipate them having a top 5 secondary this year, and I think it's only going to get better. So absolutely, there's a pathway, because I like what he says. He doesn't say they will be DBU in 3 years. There's a pathway for them to achieve that in the next 5 years. Yeah, I buy that. Absolutely buy that.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from Wade Garrett. Quarterback, O-line, D-line. Which group is most important to build a football team from scratch?
Buy O-line, hold D-line, sell quarterback.
Yep.
Because if it's from scratch, it's what positions are going to build your culture. Like that's what it boils down to for me. So that's a good question, but an easy answer.
Yep, absolutely. Buy, sell, hold from Christopher Crosby. Notre Dame has the best linebacker room in college football. However, Texas linebacker Anthony Hill Jr. is the best linebacker in the country.
I got to think about that one, Trevor, because he might be the best NFL draft prospect in the country. I don't know that he's the best college football linebacker. Anthony Hill is very good, but I don't know, man. Trevor, what's your opinion on this? I think he's very good. I'll buy it because I think he's in the conversation. But I watched that kid from Pitt, and I'm like, that kid's really flipping good.
Yeah,
but. So like Anthony Hill last year for Texas had 113 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss, and 8 sacks. That's very good. It's a very, very good production. He did that in 16 games, right? 16 games. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if Texas would have beat Ohio State, they would have been the team that I talked about. You're asking a team that loses their conference title game to play 17 games to win a championship, which is absolutely nuts. But you look at the kid from Pitt last year, and he had 115 tackles last season, 101 tackles last season, 15 and a half tackles for loss and 7 sacks in 13 games. He also had 4 interceptions and 3 breakups, whereas Anthony Hill is more of a run stopper blitzer, where Kyle Lewis can run stop, can blitz, and is a very good cover player. 9 pass breakups and 4 interceptions last year for him. That is absurd 3 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. He had 9 quarterback hurries. That is really good production for an off-ball linebacker who also had 15 and a half tackles for loss.
Mm-hmm.
That means he can go this way and that way equally as effective. And so I'd say you could make a case for him. I'm not going to argue with someone that wants to say Anthony Hill is the best linebacker, but I like that kid from Pitt. He's a really, really good football player.
Yeah.
Really good football player. So, yeah, I'm going to stand on this one. I'm going to sell it. I think he's in the conversation, but I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good submission, Chris, because it's making me think a little bit. I think it's a situation for me where both parties in this submission are in the conversation. I don't know if I can definitively say that Notre Dame has the best linebacker room in college football as of today. I think I can definitively say they have one of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't confidently say they have the best one. They have all the ingredients for it, but I love the depth, love the pieces at the top. And then in the same light, I can't definitively say that Anthony Hill is the best. You have the kid from Pitt. CJ Allen comes back from Georgia.
I forgot about him.
And he's going to be one of the only returning defensive pieces on that defense from last season. With all that they lost in the front 7, CJ Allen comes back. You have the kids from Pitt that you talked about. I mean, I know LSU has a pair of good linebackers that are coming back as well.
Was outstanding last season.
So in the same light, I can't definitively say Anthony Hill's the best, so I got to sell it. for both. Yeah.
I didn't even think about the best linebacker room, Trev, because I kind of took that as the setup to the second part of the Bice hold. But that's a good point. Like, could Notre Dame have the best? Because what did I say last week? Kingston emerging as that that guy next to Drake is the key to them having the best linebacker room.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now they're top 4.
Yeah.
Confidently. Number 1, they need to show a little bit more.
Yep.
But they're in the conversation. It's a great point.
Buy, sell, hold. We all know how talented the linebacker room at Notre Dame is. So buy, sell, hold. Madden Faramo has the ability and skill set to be the best out of all of them.
So I think he's outstanding. But I think if everyone in the linebacker room reaches their full potential, Kingston's their best player.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
I don't know that Madden's even better than Drake. That's debate for number 2.
Yeah, fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. This is the best opening week of games in several years.
Without diving into it again, I'd buy that. There's a lot of great games that first week.
Yeah.
A lot of great games. I'll buy that. Very good opening slate of games.
And then buy, sell, hold Boise State's chances of being the group of 5 representative for a second straight season.
I buy them having I buy them as one of the top contenders to get back.
Mm-hmm.
Will they be as dominant as they were last year in the run game and things like that? No. But what's going to help Boise State this year is I think their defense is going to be really flipping good this year in that league because they bring back a lot of guys. They lost one linebacker to the portal. Another one comes back. The Virgin Morgan kid might be the best DN Notre Dame plays this year outside of Ruben Bain. And production-wise, he is the best they've played. And you've got the Feely kid coming back at D tackle. They've got a decent secondary. Like at their level, they could absolutely be that. And they still have talent at running back. They just don't have the best running back in college football anymore. Yeah. They have my first team all opponent center. They have a legit, from what I've read, they have a potential first round draft pick caliber left tackle in Cage Casey, whose name I have a very hard time saying because it's one of them tongue twister type of names, Cage Casey. And their tight ends, I think my second team all opponent tight end. So they weren't just handed off to this guy and he's gone and they all stink now. So they have an absolute chance to get back this season, in my opinion. I'm not saying that they're my favorite because my favorite right now is Navy, but Boise will absolutely be in that conversation this season.
Yep. I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from Iowa Irish. Brian Kelly will try to be a better coach. For example, work harder because of Notre Dame's recent success and perceived trajectory.
Yes, I believe he's already doing that. Yes. I think there are some things he's doing because I do think he feels a little bit of that heat when he sees what Marcus is doing. Agree.
Then as a follow-up, Brian Kelly will be a better coach because of Notre Dame's recent success and perceived trajectory.
I love these two submissions. This is really well thought out. Okay, it's one thing to try, but he'll be very well done, Iowa Irish. This is excellent. That one I'm selling. Because at the end of the day, he still lacks the humility to make the true necessary changes to be a better football coach. Now, their team will be better, but I don't think it's because he'll necessarily be a better football coach. He is who he is.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this before where for the first 6 months after 2016, Brian Kelly was much better. He was recruiting more. And then you got further away you got from it. He was just back to being Brian Kelly. And that's what he'll be at LSU as well.
Oh, yeah, because even in this – look, I'm somebody that thinks that LSU is going to have a season where they just kind of magically catch fire because that's what Brian Kelly has done at previous stop, did it at Notre Dame. But all along the way, he was still the same guy, but just randomly you kind of catch
all the ingredients for that team just kind of hit right,
mm-hmm.
and they were able to go be successful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Buy, sell, hold from Crying Belly. The new 105-person roster benefits Notre Dame from a talent accumulation standpoint and is a big reason the team can consider taking 3 tight ends, 5 wide receivers, and 6 offensive linemen in the class of 2026.
Buy. Yeah, I buy that. It's not the 105 roster thing, though, that is the reason. It's the fact that they can offer more than – they can offer 105 scholarships. So, like, if it was a 105 roster, but still stuck at 85 scholarships, like the SEC is doing, and some other leagues are saying, hey, we're going to still stick at 85, Notre Dame will not go to, most likely, based on what we've been told, will not go to 105 scholarship players. They will still have walk-ons, but they will be more willing to go past 85 than they have in the past. So, yeah, I buy that. That's a good observation. Very good observation.
Buy, sell, hold. Jordan Botelho could take another medical redshirt for the season, but play in the final few regular season games as well as the playoffs.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if him playing late in the year but playing less than 4 games matters. I don't know if it's got to be like a season-ending thing, but one of the criteria for additional eligibility is like back-to-back injury-plagued seasons. He got hurt in game 3 last year, so you can take a medical, and then if he doesn't play until, like, say, the final 2 games of the regular season and the playoffs, I don't know how that impacts. Like, I don't know if it has to be like season-ending or not. I don't know the answer to that. But as long as that's not true, then yeah, I do think he would have a good petition to have a 7th season. Yeah.
Good deal. Buy, sell, hold from Domer Grizz. The common thought is the biggest guys should be the first off the bus in order to intimidate the other team. But buy, sell, hold. It would be more intimidating to have your small guy go first to give them false hope and then have everyone subsequently keep getting bigger and bigger for an oh no. They do keep getting bigger reaction.
You know, I'm going to sell this, but I really like the thought of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, Bubba Frazier's the first guy off the bus. You know, good-looking athlete, but 5'10", you know, and then you know, Noah Burnett comes off next, and then it's, you know, Jordan Faison, and then boom, 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 and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, you're getting to all these. I get where you're coming from on that. I kind of dig it, but I'm going to still sell it because I still feel like first impressions are the most lasting impressions. And, you know, you're thinking like, okay, Bryce Young gets off, then Charles Jagasaw gets off the bus, then Gerby Lambert gets off the bus, then Armel Mukam gets off the bus, then Will Black gets off the bus, and Emil Wagner gets off the bus. You know what I mean? Like, Gabriel Rubio, Jason Onye, Boubacar Traore, Kingston. Yeah. I mean, it's like Drake. It's like, okay, yeah, this team is like, good Lord. When does it stop? Yeah, I'm still there, Trev. But I like where he thought Owen Strebig. Somebody said Owen Strebig, who's like 6'8", 300, you know. So, yeah, I think you were saying Sullivan Absher, you know, like Chris Tarrick. You know what I mean? Like Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon. Yeah, I'm with you. But I like where he's kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. I like the submission. Even though I'm selling it, I'm really digging where his head's at on that one, Trev.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the thought. This is just me specifically. If I saw that, and other people might interpret this differently, but if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, okay, so these are your best players. And you might have big dudes, but they might not be your best players. That's how I would interpret that.
Yep.
If I saw all of the shorter, smaller guys, I'm like, okay, this is a quick, shifty, athletic team. Those are a bunch of big dudes that won't sniff the field tonight. Yep. Whereas if it's the other way around, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is a gigantic team.
Yep.
Yeah.
We see that exactly the same way. But I like the outside the box thinking. I dig that. I really dig that.
Too. Buy, sell, hold from Eye on the Ball. Mike Mickens gets an honorary improved title and a substantial raise next year, end of the 25-26 season, before replacing Ash as defensive coordinator with an incredible package in 2027, keeping him at Notre Dame until Marcus wishes to step down.
I buy the heck out of that. Is you know, hope, we always talk about hope buys.
Man,
that is a huge hope buy for me. Huge hope buy. That's the perfect scenario right there. Because if Chris Ash is leaving in 2 years, the odds are strong that it's because he did very well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be my hope. Or if he doesn't do well, it could be the same thing. But my hope is that it's because Chris Ash is becoming a head coach somewhere and Mike Mickens is stepping in. So I'm going to hope by that one.
Yep, we see that the same. Buy, sell, hold, again from Eye on the Ball. After Mickens ascends to head coach for Notre Dame in 2029, he promotes Juwan Sider to assistant offensive coordinator as a precursor to full offensive coordinator upon Coach Denbrock's retirement after the 2030 season.
I'm selling that. I don't want Coach Denbrock to retire after the 2030 season. I want him to be around for a while longer, but I'm selling that because the odds of Jawan Sider still being at Notre Dame in 2029 are very, very slim. But I have no problem with, I don't want Marcus Freeman gone after 2028. What are you trying to do to me here, man? Like, I want Marcus Freeman here for the next 15, 20 years. So I love the thought, though. I mean, you got to really think through this one, man. Very well done, Eye on the Ball, but I'm selling that one because I don't want any of those things to be true, because I don't want Jawan Sider to be here for 5 years and the promotion gets his assistant, co-OC, hoping the guy gets like a head coaching job or something somewhere. Like, that's always what you wish. As a former coach, you're always wishing that coaches who do a good job get the promotions that they desire.
Yeah.
Like, it sucked that Dylan McCullough left Notre Dame, but it was also awesome for him because of knowing the opportunity he's getting of something he wants to do, of working with a Pete Carroll, and working in the NFL and type of thing. Is like, you respect it. You're happy for him, even though it hurts Notre Dame. You're happy for him. And same thing with these other guys. Like, if Mike Mickens ever leaves because he gets a head coaching job, I'm happy as heck for him, because that's his ultimate. A lot of coaches want to be that someday. But yeah, I would hope Jawan Sider gets a better opportunity than that before the next 6 years or 5 years. But I like where your head's at. But I don't want Marcus Freeman leaving in the next 5 years.
No. Buy, sell, hold from We Are Notre Dame. USC and Notre Dame renew their contract, and the game gets played in the beginning of the year every year.
I'm selling that. That would really bother me, because then now you're just letting USC kind of punk you into playing. They throw a hissy fit. They threaten to not play you anymore so they can get everything that they want. Screw that. I'd rather not play them than that. Like, I don't. No, because what's Notre Dame getting at? Oh, still going to play USC. Okay, then you've now allowed them to once again continue to dominate when you play. It's all up to USC, because USC can throw a hissy fit anytime they want about the schedule, and Notre Dame has to go along with it just to keep the rivalry going. Like, no, I'm selling that. I would tell them to take a hike, because I still believe that USC needs Notre Dame, in my opinion, more than Notre Dame needs USC. That's what I believe. Now, do I want the series to go away? Heck no. But I'm not going to continue to allow USC to always determine when they play. They don't. Notre Dame doesn't get to move the end of the season game. Like, what is Notre Dame's negotiation here? We got to do whatever you want, or we're just not going to play you. Call their bluff. Say, no, if you want to play the same time every year, cool. We're playing you the last game of the season every year. That's our compromise. Then it's easier for you, and that your league you can work with the Big Ten to say, hey, can you not have us a second trip across all the way to the East Coast in November, something like that. So let's say every November they get 2 home games, and then their road game is either at Oregon or at Washington or at Nebraska, where it's not as far of a trip, something like that. Fine, work with them on that. But we're not going to play at the beginning of every year. No, I don't want that. I'd rather drop them than have to allow them to fully dictate. Because then what's Notre Dame getting out of this other than, oh, great, we still have USC on the schedule? Because the thing is, it also hampers Notre Dame's ability to schedule in the future, because now your Septembers are going to be gauntlets if you want to play anybody else, because you can't. Most of the teams out there, you can't play anywhere other than early in the season. If you want to get Bama on the schedule, it has to be in the first 3 weeks. If you want to get Texas on the schedule, it has to be in the first. So now you're going to be playing what? Your first 3 games in 2029 is going to be Texas, USC, Texas, and Bama. Like, that's how. No, it's silly. Screw you. Go play somebody bad. Go fall into to mediocrity in the Big Ten, and then when your coach fails, which he will, and then you want to come crying back to us. Now we can now set the terms. So I want that series to go, but I'm not someone who I want it to go. Whatever you got to do, make it happen again. No, because then you've set a precedent that all you got to do is threaten to not play us anymore, and we'll bend the knee and do whatever you want us to do. What's to stop them in 10 years from saying, well, no, now we want it to be in week 4 every year? It's silly. No. If you want to play us, we either keep the deal we have now, or we play last game of this season, like every other major rivalry in college football. When do Florida and Florida State play? When does Bama and Auburn play? When does Ohio State and Michigan play? When did Clemson and South Carolina play? When does Louisville and Kentucky play? I think the Carolinas are the only rivalries where the big rival's not at the end of the year. The number one rival. It's not at the end of the year. It's like NC State and Carolina. There's been some, but even they, I think, play most years last game of the regular season. Virginia,
I think Texas, Oklahoma's in the middle of the season. Yeah.
Well, Texas and Oklahoma, I don't know that, but that's also a rivalry that wasn't always the big rival. Like Texas A&M was a bigger rivalry for a long time. Texas and Oklahoma for a long time weren't even in the same league until they joined the Big 12. But that's an example of but right now it is their biggest rivalry right now. But what game is Texas playing at the end of their season the last couple of years? A&M.
The last couple year? I mean,
last year and this year, their last game is A&M. Now that they're in the SEC, they're back to playing A&M at the end of the year, which is what they used to do. Because that's the thing is, I believe that when Texas and Texas A&M were in the same league, that they played each other at the end of the season every year. So if you look at like 1990, they played A&M at the end of the year, A&M at the end of the year, in 89, 88, A&M. So that's why they played that game in October, because Texas's biggest rival at the time was Texas A&M, and that's why the Oklahoma game got established earlier in the year. And then when Texas A&M left for the SEC, that's when Oklahoma and Texas became their biggest rivals against each other. So, and I think Oklahoma's biggest rival was not Texas for a long time. It was Oklahoma State. It was Bedlam. So you can make the case that now it's the biggest rivalry, but it's not historically the biggest rivalry.
That's fair.
The in-state games are.
No, that's fair. I was just going off of
your argument's good, but like I don't know that you were born yet when A&M left the SEC. When did they leave? No, actually, you were born when they left the SEC. Hold on a second. When did Texas A&M leave when did they join the SEC? It was 2012. So yeah, you were alive, but for a long time, that was their big. Texas and Texas A&M were big rivals.
Yeah. Yeah. This one's tough for me, I'll be honest, and it's probably the unpopular opinion amongst the people here. I'm going to sell it because I think that I just don't think it's going to get renewed. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to find a common ground. But I think there's something to be said to where, like, if USC wants to throw the sissy fit, because that's what it is, to help them out, I kind of view it as like, all right, fine. If I'm Notre Dame, it's like, fine, we'll play you wherever you want, but you're still not going to beat us. It doesn't matter. Like, it's more of that. You know, it's kind of like the same way where I know there's some people that oppose like playing Michigan again. It's like Michigan held Notre Dame out of the Big Ten. I want nothing to do with them. I want to beat them because of that. Yeah, I view this in a similar light. So, but I am going to sell it because I just don't think the contract gets renewed, unfortunately. Buy, sell, hold from We Are Notre Dame. Notre Dame keeps all their games on the schedule until at least 2030.
Sell. Somebody will want to back out, or Notre Dame may want to back out of a game because something else came along. They'll have some change. That's pretty normal. So I'll sell that. But Trev, to your last point, if they can't work out a compromise, then that means Notre Dame held their ground and said, we're not going to let you bully us into playing you whenever you want to play us. And you know what? I would support that for Notre Dame. My whole thing is work hard, Notre Dame, to keep that rivalry. Work hard to keep it, but don't let them become the team that dictates the terms entirely. Where it's like, well, if we don't play in the first 3 games and we won't play you, then I'd say, you know what? Then go. Then best of luck to you. Best of luck to you. Maybe we'll see in the playoffs again here soon. And then you start laughing as you walk out the door. Because you won't see them in the playoffs. Not with Lincoln Riley as their head coach, in my opinion.
Buy, sell, hold from We Are Notre Dame. Michigan and Notre Dame will schedule more games against each other sooner and more often.
I'm going to sell that. I just think, forget my personal opinion about it. Forget my personal opinion. The Big Ten has 9 conference games. And the Big Ten wants to schedule a Big Ten versus the SEC rivalry. The Big Ten, I believe, is also encouraging their teams to not schedule hard in the non-conference. And so I don't think Michigan will pursue that rivalry with the current direction that the Big Ten wants to go. It would be stupid for Michigan to schedule Notre Dame if your league is trying to also then set up a Big Ten versus the SEC model and you also play 9 regular season games. I just don't think that would make sense for Michigan. And that's not about ducking Notre Dame. That's about there's 2 polar opposites to scheduling properly. There's one where you schedule too easy, and I don't respect you. And then there's one where, like, dude, you gave yourself too hard of a schedule. That's ridiculous. Notre Dame is bordering on that in 2029. You know what I mean? Like, but I just don't think, let's take aside a second, Trevor, whether I think they shouldn't play or whether you think they should. I'm looking at this practically from Michigan's point of view. There's merit to Notre Dame playing Michigan and scheduling Michigan. I don't think there's as much for Michigan right now to play Notre Dame. I don't think it benefits them to play Notre Dame right now with the push that the league is making. Like, why sign a 10-year contract with Notre Dame, for example? Let's say they do one like Clemson, and then in a year, your league says, oh, by the way, we're doing a Big Ten versus SEC challenge. And now you may get Bama one year. Now your non-conference is Notre Dame and Bama, and you still got to play Ohio State every year and then Michigan State and usually Penn State a lot. I just don't think that makes sense. There's a hard schedule, and then there's a ridiculous schedule. And I don't think that would make a lot of sense for Michigan. Now, if the SEC thing falls through and they don't end up not doing it, then Michigan might be more amenable to doing something like that. So forget my feelings on whether they should or shouldn't play. Just looking at it practically of whether or not it would make sense for Michigan to do that, I just don't think it makes sense for Michigan to do that. And I'm not saying that, like I said, they don't got to play good in non-conference games, but until this whole SEC versus Big Ten thing gets figured out, I don't think Michigan's going to be jumping into any other big team is going to be jumping into any 10-year contracts the way that Clemson just did.
So hold, the SEC gets 4 teams in this year's playoffs, and one of the teams will have 3 losses.
Ooh. Okay, I'm bringing up my playoff bracket. And let's see here. Where's my playoff bracket? Let's go to right here. I believe I have 4 SEC teams getting in. I do. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to sell that, but I don't sell with great certainty because I could definitely see, like, if it's like with last year, Trev. If Georgia's 9-3, there's a scenario in which they're 9-3 and deserving of a playoff bid. I just don't know that there's going to be enough Indianas and SMUs fighting for those spots as we've seen in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and sell that, but I don't sell it with, like, there's no way a 3-loss SEC. I'm not saying that because, like, if you look at Georgia, for example, let's say Georgia loses. Let's say they get upset by Georgia Tech. Let's say they lose to Alabama at home, and let's say they lose to Florida on a neutral field. They would then still have a win at Tennessee, a win at Auburn, a win over Ole Miss, and a win over Texas. Then you can move that around any way you want. Okay, what if they lose to Texas but beat Georgia Tech? Then you have a win on the road against Georgia Tech, who we think is going to be a pretty good team. So no matter how you spin that, the 3 losses are going to be trumped by some really darn good wins. What hurt the teams that were trying to get in last year with 3 losses is they all had like a good win. But, like, other than beating Georgia, what was the big win that Alabama was hanging their hat on? Beating another 3-loss SEC team that was trying to get in South Carolina? Like, what was the big win they were hanging their hat on? Where if Georgia lost a second or third game, they could be like, yeah, but we still beat this team and this team and this team. You know, we still beat Clemson by 30. And what was the big win Ole Miss was hanging their hat on? Well, we beat Georgia. Well, who else? You had one good win. That doesn't trump the 2 bad losses. Georgia could have 3 really good losses and still have 3 really good wins. That kind of washes some of that away. I don't think having 3 losses eliminates you from being a playoff team. It just, they better be good losses, and you better have a lot of good wins stacked on your schedule, and they don't have that. Like Notre Dame's 2017 team, if they would have been more competitive against Miami, would have absolutely belonged in the playoff, in a 12-team playoff. Because, yeah, they had lost to a ranked Stanford team, a ranked Miami team, and a top 10, 2 top 10 losses. They still would have had a win over a top 15 USC team. They would have still had a win over a top 15 Michigan State team. They would have had a win over a top 25 NC State team. Like, they still had a lot of really good wins on that schedule that year. And so that's the difference. I think a Georgia could do that maybe. And it could also be where Georgia's 3rd loss comes in the SEC title game. Let's say Georgia only loses to Texas, and then they lose at Georgia Tech, and they win the rest of their games, but then they lose a 3rd game, and let's say they play, Texas in a rematch or Bama or somebody, and they lose that, and now they're a 3-loss team. They should be in. So it just depends on the team, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to sell that, but I don't sell it with great conviction.
Yeah, I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from Josh CSP77. Opening game against Miami, Notre Dame offense. Opening game against Miami, Notre Dame's offense will not have any 3-and-outs.
So, I want at least one.
Yeah,
Miami's got tough. They're not a bum defense. So,
and then buy, sell, hold. Mountain Dew with sugar is better than the stuff with corn syrup.
I'm not commenting on this because I don't want to talk about this question anymore. I'm on week 2 of no Mountain Dew, and it's been still very hard. So I want to move on from this question as quickly as possible. Sorry, Josh.
I know we're kind of ending the tail end of cards here. Tornado sirens are going off here, and Lauren's in the middle of it driving home. So I'm going to go
deal with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
go deal with that. I'll finish up here. Yep,
all right,
go
folks.
deal with that. All right. So we got some more here from Irish Gordian Knot. Coach Freeman will name the starting quarterback after the first week of fall camp. I'm going to sell that, but I'm not going to sell it with great conviction. I think it'll be a little bit later than that, but it could happen that soon. So I'll sell it. I think it'll be within the first 10 practices or so, and see how that goes. Next one, the offense will average more yards per game than the 2005 offense with either CJ or Kenny. 477. Let's see, where would that rank nationally? Total offense. 477 would rank them 6th in the country, 5th in the country. That's possible. I'll buy it as a possibility. I'm not saying for sure it's going to happen, but it's possible. It's possible. Irish Gordian Knot also says fans will be surprised at how much Jeremiah Love is being used in the pass game. I'm going to sell that because I'm going to buy the premise of what you're saying, but I'm going to sell it because I think most Notre Dame fans are expecting Jeremiah Love to be used in the pass game. So I don't think that's going to be something that we necessarily are surprised by. But the premise of your submission is spot on. I think that Jeremiah Love will be used in the pass game more this season. Certainly. By so hold, Lauren Landau will be regarded as a top 3 strength and conditioning coach by the end of the season. Notre Dame's size, strength, and speed will surprise a lot of folks. I buy that. Whether he is or isn't, it's like you said, regarded. He may be, he may not be. I mean, he could end up being in the top 3, and they don't look like it all the time. There's a lot of things that go into that, but I'll buy that one. Perception-wise, I'll buy that. This is really good from Black Irish. I did see this one when I was putting them together. It goes, ESPN actually had an intelligent conversation this morning. The point of the conversation was whether or not a player in any sport was considered to be a great player, even though that player didn't win a championship. My opinion is yes to a player being great, even though they didn't win a championship. It's a great submission, Chris. It really is good. My belief is that an individual player can absolutely be great without winning a championship. Ken Griffey Jr. never won a World Series. Barry Bonds, I don't think, ever won a World Series. They are 2 of the greatest outfielders to ever play the game. Mike Trout has never won a World Series, I don't believe. That they are great players that didn't win championships. Does the lack of a championship maybe prevent you from – let's look, Dan Marino is a great player. Never won a championship. If we're arguing who was better, Dan Marino or John Elway, then championships can become into the conversation as far as who was better, but it doesn't mean that the other wasn't great. Because greatness about an individual player is about that individual player. We were talking about Barry Sanders earlier, never won a championship. Does that mean he wasn't a great player? Of course he was. I think the people that make the argument opposite what you and I believe, Chris, say that because they are shallow in their thinking, or they're trying to score some sort of point. They don't like a player, and so they use this type of gotcha type of thing to make a petty point. To say that an individual player is not a great player because he didn't win a championship in a team sport is ridiculous. Now, if you want to say you can't be considered a great golfer if you've never won a major, fair. If you want to say a tennis player is not a great player because he or she never won a Grand Slam, fair. It's an individual sport. You're based on your individual accomplishments. But to say that about a quarterback in the NFL, for example, is silly. To say that about a NBA player who never won a championship is ridiculous. You can be a great player without winning a championship. Now, can you be the greatest to ever do it? That might be a little bit of a tougher conversation. But even then, you can still be great without winning a championship. So I absolutely am someone who believes that you can be a great player, a Hall of Famer, and an all-time great, top 10 ever, top 5 ever, and have not won a championship. So I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that. Really good submission. Sean McCardle, Joey O'Brien's offensive wide receiver tape is better than any receiver you've evaluated in the 26 class. I'll sell that. It is not. It's very good, but it's not even better than some of the guys that Notre Dame has on the board. His receiver tape is not better than Caden Finley's, for example. So even if Notre Dame was recruiting him as a receiver, he would not have the best receiver tape that Notre Dame is going after. But it's very good. If Joey O'Brien called Notre Dame tonight, said, "Hey, coach, listen. The more I think about it," he pulls a Jerry Tillery. "The more I think about it, I want to play wide receiver in college. Do you guys still want me as much as you did before?" The answer is absolutely. If you truly want to play receiver, we will absolutely recruit you and sign you as a receiver and be happy about it. But I still think the defensive back's his best position. But I'd have no problem with him playing receiver. He's a very good player at wide receiver. Just not the best I've evaluated. And, just not even on the Notre Dame board. Double bogey. The national champion will be someone who hasn't won one in the playoff era. Well, based on my preseason prediction, that will be true. By a hold from double bogey, Clemson will have the best statistical defensive front this season. I'll buy that because the system they're in. I'll buy that. It's not a given, but I'll buy that. Notre Dame will have 3 first-team All-Americans by 1 voting service. I'll also buy that. I think Leonard Moore. I think we'll see at least 1 offensive lineman, and then either Jeremiah Love or a D lineman or a linebacker. Someone from one of those positions will also be a first-team All-American. So I will buy that as well. I'm going to try to work through these kind of quickly because it is getting a little bit nasty outside here too. And I want to be able to actually, was that the last one? Let me see. Was that the last one? Yeah, that was actually the last one. Let me see if there's any super chats here. Here's one from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop with a super chat. People forget, and this is from Brady's own mouth, he was going to commit to Michigan. He took one last drive to campus and basically sold himself to get a Notre Dame offer. I kind of remember that story, Charlie. But no, I mean, you're not wrong. There was not a given that Brady Quinn was always going to end up at Notre Dame. That's another one of the many recruitments that they almost blew. So, but yeah, it's a great story and a great career from Brady Quinn. So appreciate that super chat, man. Everybody, that is the final submission for today. I want to thank you all so much for being with us today. If you are in my area, be safe today. We are getting some pretty bad weather, so make sure that you are taking care of you and yours. If you don't have a generator, you need to get one of them soon. So anyway, thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to preview the defensive end position tomorrow. We will also break down who we believe to be the top 10 quarterbacks in college football next season. So we're very much looking forward to that debate as well. So join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Friday, 1 o'clock, we'll have our mailbag. Looking forward to that as well. So thanks for being with us. 5 o'clock tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, be with us here in the Irish Breakdown Podcast so we can talk about the Notre Dame defensive ends and the top 10 quarterbacks in college football. And we'll also have a daily mailbag tomorrow as well. Have an awesome rest of your day, everybody, and we'll see you again on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.